So thank you, everybody, for coming today to our Board of Trustees meeting of April 8th. If we could please start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So first we'll start with public comment. If you're here for one of the public hearings, you'll also get a time during that public hearing to speak, but this is the time for general public as well. So just come on up here to the podium, give us your name, address, and 3 minutes.
Hi, Mike McCready, 4957 Bloomfield Ridge. Since I've announced my candidacy for Bloomfield Township Supervisor, I've heard from residents on a number of issues. Coincidentally, one of those issues is on the agenda, is an agenda item on tonight's agenda. I've heard from a number of residents and people regarding the concern of all the non-power lakes becoming power lakes. I know there have been some meetings with the Department of Natural Resources. However, our leadership at the very top levels need to be involved. The supervisor needs to be setting up these meetings with our political representatives. If the DNR has the authority to do what is being proposed, it needs to be changed at the legislative level. Having been a state representative for 6 years, I've been involved in numerous issues where the state bureaucracy has tried to take over local control. I think you'll remember that they took over our cell tower control, took it away from us, losing the PEG fees and some other fees. They also took over our speed limit control on our dirt roads. And it's happening again now with our lakes. It is imperative our supervisor meet with the legislators in Lansing to curtail this activity. If you have not been meeting with our representative in Lansing that have the ability to modify the laws, you are jeopardizing their property values. Our lakefront resident homes, as well as jeopardizing the peace and quiet of their homes. I would encourage you, as you're on the board, I believe you're the supervisor, the head of all the lake boards, that you need to be involved in leading these meetings and make sure that this is changed legislatively and not through a bureaucratic process. Thank you.
Great. It's good to see you likes the way we did it. Anybody else?
Mary Alice LeDuc, Bloomfield Township resident. This board is being complacent in their oversight of water rates. The national association that you are claiming is the guide for your rate policy, the American Water Works Association, does not condone rate setting based on pipe size. So why are you doing this? Why are you paying Raftellus to give you faulty information? A comparison to neighborhood communities shows that Birmingham, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, Clawson, Huntington Woods, Lathrop Village, Royal Oak, Southfield have very low, under $10 or no pipe-sized charges. Why has this board not demanded alternative water rate setting proposals from the Water Department? Why do you accept an erroneous basis for rate setting from 2021 that was based on 10 to 12 people who showed up for a meeting and small written survey that did not show people the rate setting options? The change from usage only to pipe size was not needed, and it was not what residents asked for. While there was interest in putting higher rates on commercial properties, the onerous pipe size fees on residents with large meters is unfair and unsubstantiated. Wear and tear on pipes comes from time, weather, and usage. It is not based on pipe size, even underground. As elected officials of the taxpayers of Bloomfield Township, you are expected to be more responsible, to ask questions, and not just to accept the easy way of doing things. This board should have been looking into rate alternatives in the fall. Has anyone asked for an alternative rate plan? I suspect no, since elected officials in Bloomfield Township rarely question employee or consultant proposals. Why are you not looking at changing price premiums for water usage during the summer when it costs everyone higher rates with peak usage? You could easily do this. Why is no one on this board doing their fiduciary responsibility on water rates? Why are you playing unfair with some residents? Glad there's an election in November.
Good evening. My name is Mark Antockley. I'm a Precinct 3 delegate in Bloomfield Township. And as Dirk mentioned in one of the previous meetings, what are the fact basis for the rates? We had a 40-minute word salad 2 weeks ago with no economic calculations, just a magical appearance of rates. So let's take a look at the board packet from back in January. Showed 6.2 million above revenues and depreciation. We put back in 1.7 million in depreciation. That's 7.9 million in additional cash. Are we going to hear about the capital expenditures for the year or just the 1.5 million last quarter? How much extra revenue is generated? We're probably not going to get that because we haven't gotten to the last few years. Maybe because we don't post the numbers until after the meeting. With regards to the American Water Works Association, they have a fixture calculation that can be determined based on the information in the assessments. So how many bathrooms you have, how many sinks, how many kitchens, dishwasher, laundry facilities. I live in a condo association. My exterior water irrigation is paid for by the Township Association. What I use is just in my house. Based on those calculations, I expect it to be less than 30 gallons per minute requirement, which is less than a 3/4 inch pipe, yet I'm being charged for a 1-inch pipe. I've submitted a request for this information via FOIA to the clerk's office. I hope to receive it soon. It also means that based on Table 6.1 in the same guidelines, these 6-inch pipe are anywhere from 1,350 gallons per minute to 1,600. You've never told us which one you're using. My 1-inch meter is 50 gallons per minute. It means that on the water rates, you're overcharging me by 32 cents compared to 6-inch rates, and on sewer rates, 45 cents. It's not fair or just based on your calculations. Never even put them up. You never even tell us how much you collected in excess of what you did the previous year. How much water did we put in the budget? How much did we end up using and charging our residents? How much was left over and extra? We went from 9.2 million in fund reserves to 24 million since 2020 to 2023. That's $15 million. We're spending it on an 11 million project that has zero return on investment.
Anybody else like to come up and speak? And the only public hearing is actually the site plan use, so if you are here about any of the other items, this is your time to talk. Anybody? Hi, Angela.
Hi. Hello. Oakland County Commissioner Angela Powell, District 9. I just wanted to address the board members in regards to a couple constituents reaching out to me in regards to their concerns about the speedboats. We know, and you all know, a lot of this stuff is new to me for my Bloomfield Township residents. But I just wanted to also just let you all know that they reached out to me in regards to Forest Lake and Lower Lake. Just the that they are against the speedboats being allowed to operate on those lakes. So I just wanted to bring their concerns because they brought it to me, to the board members, so you all know at least how some of the residents feel. And because of my absence on Wednesday, due to me having to take my daughter for some medical tests. I also want to just be here today to just bring comments about what I've received from constituents. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
you.
And thank you to Marcia Gershenson, did come on behalf of the county. Thank you to, also there were some of the board members, it wasn't just me that was at those meetings, and the elected officials of the state. We had senators and we had congressmen, but we also had others on the board here that came to support as well. So thank you to everybody who came to all those meetings that we organized with the state officials to get that all done. So thank you. Even though you weren't there, the county was there with Marcia. Thank you. Is anybody else here for public comment? Come on up.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Barbat. I am here to comment on item number 7, the liquor license discussion. So I've been in the gas station business pretty much my whole life, 30 years. I started changing the garbages and filling the coolers, and I've seen firsthand how these gas stations have evolved. They're no longer gas stations, what we think of, 9 out of 10 people long ago used to stop at a gas station to get fuel or to service their vehicle. Today, 9 out of 10 people will go into gas stations to buy a convenience store item. The gas has become very much secondary. And in terms of convenience, I've spoken to hundreds of residents, and they all told me, coming home from work on a Friday, if I could avoid going in and out of those parking lots of Kroger or Plum Market and just come right up to the front door and grab a bottle of wine, avoid walking through a 50,000 square foot building, waiting in a long line. Oh my God, that would be so convenient and amazing. Get home to my family. And they all say the same thing. Stations are no longer what they were. Like I said, they have full service restaurants. They have wines from all over the world. They have local Michigan craft beers. And it's just the convenience factor and not allowing stations in Bloomfield to sell large package alcohol, nothing small, but large package alcohol is really a disservice to the residents. It's not, I don't believe it's a service for convenience. I've heard a lot of people state that after COVID, they wanted to avoid contact with large crowds. Another reason why they would prefer stopping at a station rather than a large grocery store. And when it comes to safety, today the POS systems do not allow anyone to bypass an age requirement. The ID has to scan through the system, verify the age before the transaction could go through. And I'm not talking about the smaller little stations that are very tight and they can't have a selection. I'm talking about new stations, large windows, very bright, canopy lights shining in, very safe for women and children, and that's why people don't want to go to the old stigma of a small liquor store, where the windows are covered with all advertisements. It's a small place, it hasn't been updated. They're avoiding that now. They want to come to a new-aged convenience store with gas. And they're on the corners, they're very convenient, and I think that it's an asset to Bloomfield. I think that Detroit and Bloomfield are the last cities that restrict gas stations. West Bloomfield, Commerce, Birmingham, Rochester Hills, Royal Oak, I can go on and on. They all allow gas stations to sell alcohol, and I think it would be a great asset with a great looking new convenience store that we have in this township. So thank you very much. 1 second left.
Anyone else here? Again, unless you're here, if you're here for anything other than the special land use request, this is the only chance to speak. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Next, we have approving the board minutes of March 26th. 25th. We've all had a chance to look them over. Unless there's any changes, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Kalinsky. Support. Support by trustee Faki. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. So next we go on to the public hearing. So the way this will run is first we'll have the presentation, and then we'll have the public comment, and then bring up the developer and then the discussion.
Good evening, board. I'm Andrea Bibby with the planning department here at Bloomfield Township, actually technically PBO, Planning, Building, and Ordinance. Be respectful to my department. I am here tonight to give kind of a rehash, if you will, or another presentation as it relates to a proposal that did go before the board on February 12th of this year. This is located at 6255 Telegraph Road. This is a proposal for a new standalone commercial child care center, daycare facility. The name of the development is Primrose Child Care Center. We have, since the February 12th meeting, we have updated, there has been some changes or some updated information. If you'd like me to, I didn't know if you want me to jump into the site plan review and give an overview of that, or you want me to go through the update first, if there's any preference.
I like the update.
I like the update.
Okay.
Because we already had the.
Sure,
first
sure,
introduction.
no problem. So as I stated, this was heard, there was a hearing before the Township Board on February 12th of this year. And then during that time, at the conclusion of the public hearing and while the board had their discussions, it was determined that there was a provision within our zoning ordinance which requires up to 100 square feet per child enrolled, that there should be at least 100 square feet per child in the playground area. So it was determined at that time that the applicant was deficient in providing their square footage in compliance with our zoning ordinance. So the applicant, based on information they heard at that meeting, they determined that they would like to, they elected to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and present their case before the Zoning Board of Appeals, also indicating that they do have posted schedules, as well as which also prescribes outdoor playtime in each one of their individual classrooms. That's part of their policies and procedures of their programming. Those schedules are posted within every classroom. So the point being is that there has been a demonstration by the applicant that there is in fact a schedule in which each classroom, based on age group, does have outdoor playtime. So that was provided by the applicant. We did have an opportunity within the planning division to do some research in regards to some of our play areas that are within the township, as well as looking at some surrounding communities. So with that, the zoning board did approve the variance. There was some very specific information that was provided at that meeting in which the Zoning Board of Appeals, their action and the draft minutes are actually provided within your staff report this evening. And that information was very specific to the applicant, indicating that based on the scheduled playtime for each age group, and based on the rotation, again, this is going back to that daily schedule, the operations and procedures of Primrose, which is a natural franchise. These are their standard operating procedures. And based on that information and based on those numbers, the applicant who is here with us this evening that could answer any questions, did indicate that at no given time would there be more than 44 children in the play area based on the scheduling that's provided. So with that, I would just say that based on what was approved, the 9,400 square foot play area does apply a 47 square foot play area. Well, actually, I'm sorry, as proposed, if we would have looked at the ordinance directly, with 9,400 square feet of play area divided by the 200 students, that would have provided each child 47 square feet of play area, 100 being required per child. So with the now 9,400 play area, with the 44 children outside at one time, based on policies, procedures, and operations as presented by Primrose, as approved by the zoning board, that they would only have 44 outside at any given time. That would equal to be 213 square feet per child. So without getting really further into the other examples, I'm here to answer any questions about other playgrounds that we do have in the area. I mean, unless you'd like to hear that now, I can certainly share the assessment that we did. The assessment, we did go out and find that there are approximately 18 child care centers within the township. Most of them are affiliated with either an elementary school or a preschool or a church, place of worship. And what we did is we assessed in each one of those situations, because they are not a commercial daycare facility and they're ancillary to those permitted uses, they did not have to go through the review process, and they did not have the requirement to follow the 100 per child. However, they are registered through the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan requires that the Child Care Licensing Bureau requires a child care center to provide at least 1,200 square feet of outdoor area that's got to be protected and fenced by a natural barrier with 48 inches of height. So with that, just to kind of do a quick analysis, based on the fenced-in area that we equated for each play area, and based on how much, what I did is I took the number of students that were enrolled based on their license. We took the fenced-in area of the play area based on the different locations, and I would say there's a range of per child square footage. The per child square footage based on the fenced-in area, based on enrollment. So we're trying to compare a little bit to apples to apples. Again, these didn't have to go through the same review process as this particular daycare, but we're averaging between as low as 11 square feet per child, which would be at the Blooming Tots on Hunter Ridge. And then we go all the way up to 600 square feet per child because we're looking at Harlan Elementary School, which has a playground area of 60,000 square feet. So that's the lowest is 11, and we go all the way up to 600. But I will say the majority, when I say majority, I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of a total of, 10 out of a total of 13 play areas, that we do fall within the range of approximately, we got 48 square foot per child. We got a 58 square foot per child. So we fall within the range of anywhere between 50% to 74%, dropping down to 40%. My point is there is a fluctuation and there's a difference. So I just wanted to present that as informative to the board so that you understand what is out there within the township as it exists today. That's just kind of meant to give you a broad overview. However, that being said, I just do want to reiterate that the Zoning Board of Appeals did approve this variance, thus has essentially waived that requirement within the ordinance in terms of the size. It was determined. So I just wanted to share that information. I'm more than happy to answer any of the questions related to that. And if the board has questions related to that, I'd be happy to answer them now, and then I can proceed with the site plan.
Questions after the public hearing.
No problem. No problem. So with that, I could run through the site plan, or would you like me to bring up the applicant?
Which would you like to do?
I would like to run through the site plan. Thank you.
That's
That's what we typically do.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, just kind of doing a revisit of this proposal up here on our screen. This property is located on the east side of Telegraph Road, just north of the Maple Bypass, the MDOT Maple Bypass, which you can see here highlighted on your screen. The property itself is zoned RM, multiple family residential. The applicant, which is 814 4TMI Bloomfield LLC, is seeking approval to construct a 13,525 square foot, one-story center to be located on the vacant site on the east side of Telegraph. Many of you may recall that there was formerly a St. Andrew's Church there, which has since been demolished. On the board here, you see the proposed site plan. The site itself adjoins the Cranbrook Chase condominiums to the north, American House, which was formerly Samaritas and is actually now has a new change with Autumn House, senior housing to the east. And then, as I showed here earlier on the zoning map, you can see that they also abut the office zoning district to the south. But there is a piece of the multiple family residential portion that goes between the proposed development and the office zoning to the south. So with that, we do have requirements within our ordinance as it pertains to this use. The proposed child care facility will not include dormitories. This is to serve children ages 6 months to 6 years. It is scheduled to operate Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And also they do provide, we have discussed I think I gave an overview already of the proposed play area in terms of the size, which is 94,200 square feet. There are 3 dedicated play areas within this area. Each play area is specifically dedicated to a certain age group and then has certain play equipment that is geared towards that specific age group. They do have 3 different areas that are designated for the infant-age children. They also have a preschool play area, as well as a after-school age children play area. So they do have areas that are designated again as the child grows, then they would enter into a different play area. And then this area is surrounded by a 6-foot-high black vinyl-coated chain link fence. I would like to, on your screen here, you can see this is not the over. This is just showing the playground equipment, no landscaping. You can kind of see where these designated areas are designed there to the north of the site as well to the east. Floor plan. This is the proposed dumpster enclosure, which is required by ordinance to be brick masonry enclosure with a gate. And here we have the landscape plan. You can see that the landscape plan, they do identify that there will be plantings up to 5 feet high that will be on the exterior of the playground fencing along the northerly and easterly play areas to meet the screening requirement. And they also want to note that there is currently immediately to the north, there is an existing 8-foot-high masonry wall between the subject parcel and the Cranbrook Chase condominiums to the north. So I'm just noting here that there has been a landscape plan that has been submitted, has been reviewed, and the applicant has submitted a site plan which does show the screening along the entire northerly property line and the easterly property line that's going to be between the fence and the property line to screen the fence from public view. Another change that we're seeing on the site itself is the site currently has 2 access points, and with the new formation and with MDOT's encouragement and requirement, they are now providing 1 single access point that is more centralized into the center of the site for a single point of ingress and egress into the site. So that is a change to what currently exists. Here is an overall view of the classrooms. Each classroom has the ability to enter, exit out into the exterior from the classroom into a fenced-in area. As you may recall, the applicant was approved by the zoning board to install a fence within the front yard that runs to along the Telegraph Road frontage close to the building. Between the parking and the building, there will be a fence that will allow safely for each child to exit the classroom through a fenced-in area safely and then to reach the designated play area. They do provide a total of 46 parking spaces, which does meet the ordinance requirements for child care centers. The site plan and documents were approved and reviewed by our traffic engineer by a traffic study that was provided by the applicant, finding that in his report, which is in your packet, finding that there is no traffic impact. Analysis was completed consistent with accepted traffic practicing engineers and finds that the proposed development is expected to have a minimal impact to surrounding networks. One thing I wanted to point out is that the applicant has presented that the operations for Primrose daycare requires that the parents, when they bring their children to drop them off for daycare, that they actually have to park the car and bring the child in. So to alleviate any concerns related to long pickup or drop-off lines, they do have policies and procedures in place that require somebody to come in, go into the school to drop off their child and come out. So alleviates that long wait line pickup. Again, the landscape plan, as you can see laid out in front of you, they have done a vegetated 10-foot greenbelt buffer along the Telegraph Road frontage, as well as added any required trees as it relates to parking lot trees in accordance with our zoning ordinance. The landscape plan was reviewed by our landscape architect in their report dated January 26. It was determined that they are going to be required to, based on the caliper of replacement trees, anytime that replacement trees, which is a certain tree that's determined to have a certain amount of importance or it's in good condition, we require those trees to be replaced at a certain replacement value. Upon our review by our landscape architect, they will be required to, they are about they decreased the replacement value from the original. They were short 186 inches caliper. And now that since they have revised and updated, this is not an update from the last township board meeting, just to clarify. When I say updates, I apologize. This is not updated or changed since you last saw it. These are just things that occurred throughout the process. And just noting that they will have to make a contribution to the Woodland Trust Fund for the deficiency of the replacement trees. I did show you the masonry trash enclosure, which is located there on the west side of the site. The dumpster location is in this area here. And you can see that there are evergreen plantings to screen that dumpster enclosure from views to the neighbors. So that does comply with the provisions of our zoning ordinance. Because this is considered a special land use, within our zoning ordinance, we do look at the special criteria within section 42, 6.2 of our zoning ordinance, in which we take under consideration how or if there are any negative impacts to this proposed use. And looking at this, we do not see that there's going to be any additional noise other than that which is customarily associated with the daycare. No additional odors. The lighting has been addressed and reviewed with a photometric study that has been provided to ensure that the lighting will have zero impact on the adjacent properties. And then lastly, we're looking at the aesthetics. How does this building, how does this use fit in the area in which they're looking to locate? The building materials this is the view here. That would be from the Telegraph Road frontage. The building is comprised of a metal roof, board and batten siding in Arctic white, and a stone cap wainscoting along the base of the building, shutters, and a decorative weather vane element on the rooftop. I do want to note that the applicant is still determining what their final plan would be for signage. Any signage plan will have to make an application to the design review board and then would have to be reviewed and approved accordingly. So this is an example of the signage in which they would be considering. This is, again, the view from Telegraph Road. You can see the evergreen plantings to be installed to help screen that 4-foot aluminum fence, which is running the length of that frontage. And the view from Telegraph showing the what it would have the 10-foot vegetative buffer along that Telegraph Road frontage on both sides. This is the photometric plan, which it shows the proposed lighting and the foot candle measures at the property line. A copy of the building materials, color scheme. These are, and then pictures of the existing sites. So with that, we ask that we do find that the proposed daycare meets the purpose and intent of the multiple family district with minimal impact to the adjacent residential properties. The applicant did meet with the Cranbrook Chase Neighborhood Association to the north and found that they had no issues with the proposal, other than just making sure that the 8-foot masonry wall is maintained throughout the project and that there's no damage to that wall. And then also just in making a note that our departments did have an opportunity to review this. Our engineering department in their January 25th memo noted that they would be required, the applicant would be required to get approval from the Oakland County Water Resource Commission as it relates to discharge into the site's storm water into the Nicholas drain. The fire department has no concerns with the proposal, noting that fire code requirements must be met at the time of construction. And then with that, I do provide an overview of the boards and the hearings that were held, including the most updated Zoning Board of Appeals decision that was made on March 12th, 2024, approving the variance request for the deficient outdoor play area in accordance with our zoning ordinance requirements. And then lastly, you do have a list of a total of 4 suggested considerations if the township board were to consider approval of the site plan this evening. And we did add in there, based on the information provided as well as the zoning board approval, that a maximum of 44 children are permitted within the outdoor play area at any given time as presented. Compliance with the requirements of the township's departments. That would include all of our departments: fire, building, police, environmental engineering. Those are our internal reviews that would have to comply with, as well as compliance with the requirements of the landscape architect, as well as applying to the design review board for the overall signage proposal. So with that, I'm here to, would you like to
We'll open up.
have the applicant?
We can do the applicant prior to the public hearing if you like. Is the applicant here? Yeah, right.
Good evening. Andrea, as always, did an excellent job presenting the site plan and what we have planned for the facility. Just to reiterate that Primrose is a national company. They've been in business for 40 years. They are a top-ranked daycare operator with over 450 locations nationwide. And they have a keen eye on the quality of education that they provide for the children that attend, but they also, as Andrea had mentioned about the building materials and things like that, they carry it over into the construction of the building and making sure that it's cohesive with the neighborhood and the quality that Bloomfield Township expects. I'm certainly available to answer any questions that you have. I can go into a little more detail in regards to the play area and what we had learned or what we received from the tenant. I have a letter which I read at the ZBA meeting, and it's from Ben Cook, who's the Senior Director for Campus Design for Primrose Schools, and he does speak to kind of how the scheduling works for the play areas and things like that, and how we came to that 44 children number. I know that that 44 number is less than what the ordinance as written would provide. From a hypothetical standpoint, if you have 9,400 square feet of play area, you could feasibly have 94 children on and still be within ordinance. However, we understand that Primrose has presented this number of children to be the maximum that they would have for a playground event, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
We're gonna do the public hearing first and then we'll have our discussion.
Very good.
So now I'd like to open up the public hearing. If there's anybody here about this item, please come on up. About this specific item.
My name is Mark Intockley. I reside at 1550 Georgetown Drive, Precinct 3 delegate in Bloomfield Township. I wanted to confirm a couple things. 46 parking spots,
Correct.
244 children's enrolled,
Hold till the end.
244 children enrollment. Is that correct?
You can continue. You have 3 minutes and then we address all questions afterwards.
Okay, well, let's make it very simple. 46 parking lots, how many employees are there filling those 46 parking spots? 244 children, so let's say 150 parents dropping off. Doesn't sound like enough parking spots, and it seems that people will be lined out. Whoever has had to take children out of cars and walk them into schools is very well aware of how those parking spots get used up quickly, and how those parking spots, if the parent sits and talks with the teachers, delays turnaround time getting in and out of the classrooms. I hope that's addressed. I would also like to bring to the fact that back in November, Supervisor Walsh commented about another site approval that we have no idea how those patios were approved.
Again,
in
this is
excess
about this
of-
item, so if
Yes,
this
it
are
is.
you done with Primrose?
No, I'm not.
This is
I am.
about Primrose, not Legacy Hills.
You're interrupting me.
Correct, so we do have to make sure it's about this item,
Right.
correct?
If-
Yeah.
This is simply on Primrose.
Primrose only.
Well, I would like to know if a corrective action plan was made for violations or inconsistency with what the board's approved,
We will be
and how
talking
to
about
find
Legacy
those
Hills in
and
another
address
agenda.
those
Can you
with new items being released by the township.
We're not going to address those comments regarding Legacy Hills. You had your opportunity.
I'm not talking about Legacy and Hills. I'm talking about a root cause analysis for how things were approved that went awry. And I would like to,
In where? Here at Primrose?
here in the township,
No,
because
we're not-
if the township's plans are inconsistent and violations appear, how do we know on future projects those similar violations don't appear?
Look, you had every opportunity with your 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to talk about anything you wanted to talk about. You talked about a certain issue, water, that's fine. But other issues other than Primrose, we're not going to address today because you're out of line. You're out of order.
So whether or not these are approved according to what's discussed here is out of line and order? And how we make sure that
If we're not
that's done?
talking about Primrose development, then yes, it's out of order at this point in time.
Does anyone else want to talk about the Primrose specifically? Okay, so we'll go ahead and close public comment. Before we bring it back to the board, can you address the Primrose specific comments that the resident asked?
Sure, absolutely. So within our zoning ordinance, we do have parking standards as it relates to commercial childcare facilities. That is one parking space for 300 square feet of gross floor area. The proposed building is 13,525 square feet divided by 300. That makes a requirement of 45 parking spaces. The applicant is proposing 46 spaces, which includes 2 barrier-free spaces.
And if I could just ask the petitioner or the proposal, I'm sure everybody's not dropped off at once, and I'm sure based on all of the schools you have around the country, you can confidently say what time that the parents drop off their children.
Absolutely. It is staggered throughout the day. You can imagine with children from 6 weeks to 6 years, they are coming in and out throughout the day based on the parents' needs. As I had said, Primrose alone has 450 locations across the country. They have approved that the 46 spaces will meet the needs that they have for the facility. And I will also say that we deal with 3 or 4 other daycare centers that are similar in size that range from, 39 to 45 spaces for their facilities, and they run the same way. It's very similar.
And you don't have any traffic congestion issues?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead. That's fine.
I have a couple questions. Specifically in the layout that they're showing here, it actually shows the breakout of those different 3 zones for the play area.
Correct.
So when I was able to look at the site plan, we show 3 play areas. One is 3,133 square feet, one is 1,369 square feet, and one is 4,115 square feet. If you're telling me that based on what Primrose is giving you, you range from 71 square feet per kid all the way down to 31 per kid. Our ordinance was 100, and based on the Zoning Board of Appeals, it was over the entire 9,400 square feet. But any of those children don't have access to it at that time, is that correct?
That is correct. And if I could read from what was provided to me from Primrose, from Ben Cook, the senior director of campus design, that might clarify some of the issues.
Please.
And this is him speaking to the question of what are the Primrose schools' scheduled play policy and procedures. In our site layout, there are 3 individual playground areas for gross motor play. Equipment has been specifically designed for their age group, utilizing the playground space. Our classroom schedules are designed to allow flexibility for a school to set up for each classroom to have individual time on their designated playground. Schedules are posted in the classrooms. Our infant program is designed around the individual children's schedule, so at any given time, that playground space may have as few as 1 child or up to 8 children outside. Our toddler program can have up to 12 children for 1 classroom at any given time. Our early preschool and pathways program can have up to 16 children for one classroom in their designed space. Our preschool could have up to 20 children for one classroom, and our pre-kindergarten classroom could have up to 24 children in their dedicated space. Given the class rotations and numbers provided above, this represents a maximum potential of 44 children at any one time on the entire playground.
Okay. So, I appreciate that clarification. So, and they're still broken up into those 3 different playgrounds?
Correct.
Okay.
But it's one classroom at a time. So, like, you wouldn't have, if there's 2 or 3 preschool classrooms, you wouldn't have all 3 classrooms go out at the same time. You would have one classroom go out at one time to enjoy the play area.
Okay. So, when you previously came up and we were kind of discussing your site plan, Treasurer Shostak had specifically asked you about the green space to the south of your lot. At that time, you would say that you guys are not actively marketing that property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it came to the board's attention after that the property was being marketed for multifamily use. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. You had provided
And
us
if I could provide a little clarity on that.
I would like to
but
finish
go ahead.
before I have that.
Sure.
So you provided the building department with Patti contacting you, some clarification about that it kind of fell through the cracks and it was not being actively marketed.
Correct.
Even though the township was fielding calls from developers regarding that parcel.
Yes.
So my question is it still being actively marketed today?
We have taken it off the market and we took the sign down off of the property.
So you're telling me it's not on the market today?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So it is currently listed on multiple sites for real estate for sale. So I'm having difficulty understanding why we have green space and we're asking for a variance when we have banked green space that we could utilize for these kids. This is Bloomfield. We have a high standard for what we have here. And I understand they have 450 different locations and 9,400 square feet may be okay for them. This is Bloomfield. So that is a tough thing for me.
And I do understand your concern. I am not aware that it's being marketed. It's potential that our brokers hadn't taken the listing down. And to be clear, our initial intention with the southern portion was we were approached by a group that was going to buy the senior living center behind us. And they wanted that as kind of a green space area so that they'd have better visibility. That's how the marketing aspect of it started. To my knowledge, and it's possible, I can't speak to that, but my knowledge is that we are not marketing this actively. We took the sign down. If the broker neglected to take the listing down, then we'll discuss that with them as well. But in regards to usage of that area, the play area that surrounds the building is more than adequate for the use of the school itself, and also the implication from MDOT that we must have the MDOT curb cut where it is that goes down the center of the site kind of doesn't allow us to have a connected area, a play area to the school. Being adjacent to the school, if anything were to happen, if anything was an emergency situation, being directly adjacent to the school building itself is paramount for the tenant.
So MDOT is requiring you to keep that curb cut right in the middle and having a clear line of sight to the garbage can. That is, you are not able to make that move at all in part of your site plan. Is that correct?
Well, in relation to how the building is situated on the site and where that curb cut is, yes. Yes, it's 205 feet from the street to the south.
I have no further questions.
Okay, so just to clarify, the zoning board, which I'm a part of and I was there when we approved this at that meeting, the variance is contingent on it being presented as 44 students at a time. And with the 44 students at a time, Andrea, was like 200 square feet per child, right? around, I think it was even a little bit more.
I think it was, I think it was,
40, I want to say.
So that's within our, that would make it within our ordinance, right?
Actually, it would be double.
Exactly.
it'd be
or more.
213 per child, based on that number.
And then I appreciate, because we did have the discussion as far as the safety for the kids being on Telegraph Road, the importance of the children being close to the school building. While the lot is very large, you don't necessarily want kids all the way at the other end of the lot while, you know, they can't be seen.
Correct.
So I think that those are two important things to emphasize here. Thank you.
So I,
Are you done with yours?
Yeah.
so I have several issues. One is on the parking. So how many employees do you anticipate that would be parking there? Because there is no other parking adjacent.
We have 27 employees and there are 202 students. There's not 240 or whatever was brought up.
No, you had said before 200. Because my issue with that is, so over half your parking lot is already taken by staff. And that has nothing to do with if you've also got, say, a contractor working in the building or a special event going on in the building. And as a new grandma who drives my twins to daycare in Boston, where there is a very finite little lot, what happens when, and people do come a lot early morning and towards the end of the day, that is pretty typical. You're paying a day rate, so people aren't going to just come in at 10 and leave at 2. It gets very busy. And what happens is you show up and there's no place to park. So parents double park and triple park and park in handicap parking because there's no street parking. When I look at this, we're not Boston, we're not downtown, but this is a very finite space. So what's to prevent cars backing out onto the road, parents double parking? I can tell you, it's a mess, it's dangerous. You have that extra space to the south. You could twofold, make more playground, eliminate those spaces against the building, wrap the playground all the way around, because with 13,000 square feet inside, you should have more than 9,400 square feet outside. And I know you tell me there's schedules, but I also have worked in a school, and sometimes schedules get moved, sometimes programs come in, sometimes weather. They don't always get followed.
So
When you have this extra space, why wouldn't you make more outside space and use that property that you say you aren't going to use and just push your parking and add
They
more
don't
parking?
need a parking variance.
One thing to let you guys know, no matter what we thought about it, when we sent it to the ZBA, we gave up that right in a sense of, we can't discuss what you two and I would love to discuss, because the ZBA went against what we thought.
The issue of the
The
playground
ZBA
has been
decided they
decided.
can keep we asked for that, the ZBA
But
did
the
not
bottom
go
line
with it.
stops with us if we
No,
don't
the
approve
bottom
it.
line stopped
Not
with
on
the
the playground,
ZBA.
it doesn't. On the playground, that issue's been decided.
Yeah,
So
the site
other
itself,
concerns
yeah.
are other concerns, and that's fine.
Wow.
The playground issue has been decided by the zoning board of appeals.
That was, yeah.
And I think it's important to note that they did not need a parking variance.
Right.
So that didn't even come up because they're within our ordinance.
Yeah, they do comply with the parking requirements as required by our ordinance for the use that's being proposed.
Right,
So
but I
even
have
though
concerns that if we have the extra space,
Right, and
for
that's
extra
what we
parking.
sent to the ZBA, we all very clearly, oh no, the parking wasn't even,
the parking, okay, the playground, I have issues with the
Okay.
playground because I think it's very substandard. But, you know, this whole thing where we were told a month ago that space was not going to be used. Then I get a phone call that says it's listed for sale. And you can say you took the sign down. You can say they didn't tell you. What happens in 6 months when this is already being built? You decide to sell it again. Why can't you consider using some of that space, increase parking if nothing else? Because where is your excess people supposed to park? It's a safety issue. You have no place else, no side streets other than backing up onto Telegraph Road. And as somebody who does this regularly, I can feel the concern. Personal experience. I don't agree with the daycare, but wasn't allowed to go there. So, or I'm sorry, the daycare I agree with. I don't agree with the playground space being so small because you had the space for it.
so
It's still
I
gonna
know
be an
we
issue.
all definitely sent it to the ZBA when it comes to the playground. We wish they would have forced a larger playground. ZBA did not take our idea.
And I have issue with that.
But that's why the ZBA is made of residents that is different than us, and that's what unfortunately they went with. So we can talk about everything else about the site, but the one thing that is off the table for us is the size of that playground. So I just want to make sure that we all know that. I looked into that as well, because again, we all wanted it bigger. I do agree, when Chris sent me something saying that it was being marketed, I reached out to Patti and said, figure out what's going on. I agree that there's a good chance that they'll put that sign back up.
Yeah.
So another concern is, you mentioned already that they have calipers that are missing, so they're gonna have to put in. This landscaping blocks off any chance of somebody coming through there without a new curb cut or ripping down landscaping. So if we approve this as is, and they come back with a new site plan or a lot split, how does that affect the fact that we're supposed to be considering this landscaping plan with no curb cut?
We are presenting you an entire site plan and letting you know how it does or does not comply with the provisions of our ordinance. You are to take the information that's being presented to you, the layout that's being presented to you, as well as the information by the applicant, and take that into consideration. If and when any property owner has the legal right to file a site plan application on a piece of property, they have the right for the due process. If and when, who knows, 10 years, 5 years, well, I don't know, nobody knows. They would have to come back to the township. They would have to submit a site plan that, you're right, Danny, this site plan has to stay as it is, as it's approved.
That's why I
Anything
wanna
that were to,
make sure.
anything that were to come in would have to be able to fit into and to comply with this existing site plan. They would have to make site plan application. They would have to, at that time, demonstrate once again how they do or do not comply with the provisions of our zoning ordinance. And this would be looked at entirely as a new developed site and a new developed parcel, which is no different than, we do have many examples in the township where we have one Sidwell number with multiple uses located on it. Many examples of that.
Except in this case, they're trying to sell the property
Right.
separately.
I'm just pointing out
Let me ask-
examples.
And they're marketing it as commercial when it's
Right.
multifamily. So it is currently on LoopNet right now.
So with Dirk, so if we're accepting it as is, would they be able to even try and come with a practical difficulty of anything other than self-imposed?
Well,
If they tried to get a curb cut right there through all those trees that we're approving tonight, or take down a single one of those trees that we're approving tonight,
not
would
without,
they actually be able to come, or could we on the
look,
record?
they can always ask, but in practical difficulty, that would be for the zoning board of appeals. So that's not you. But if somebody wanted to develop that southern, is it south?
Yeah,
Southern parcel of property, they could do so if they can somehow work around what is approved tonight's site plan. Otherwise, they'd have to come back and ask for a revised site plan, which you would not be obligated to grant. This is a eyes wide open situation, and I understand that perhaps they're trying to keep their options open for later on doing something with that parcel of property. But whatever that something is going to have to make sure it's all subject to the landscaping and everything else remaining as approved tonight.
But so
That's what I can
knowing
say.
that we're all pretty frustrated with how it did go down at the ZBA, with that, if they were to come with this current group with us, they would have to prove to us before going to the ZBA if we wanted to even forward it to the ZBA, correct? Like, if they came to us with a site plan,
Well,
oh no, 'cause it would be-
no, they would only go to the ZBA to ask for variances from the ordinance provisions. This is a site plan, and if they wanted to somehow modify the provisions of the site plan, they'd have to come back here and ask for site plan
would they
revision.
be how would they get in there without a curb
I
cut?
have no idea.
That's what I'm trying to see,
And
like,
and
did
that's-
they leave a space open for a curb cut?
No, I mean, that's their issue, and that's something they'd have to work through. But at the end of the day, if they're asking for a revision of a site plan, they're back here. So
'Cause to be
you'd
honest,
have the
this-
ability to say no.
Or a lot
honesty
split.
is what's really a
Or a
problem.
lot split.
Or a lot split, right?
Yeah, well, the lot split is what we're talking about. Originally, they had a shared drive, and then they got rid of that. So I'm trying to see how it could still play out where a lot split came our way, but it does appear that they've blocked it off. That's why I'm asking Dirk is, if they came to us with a lot split, how on earth would they access it without us going against what we're approving tonight?
Would they come in that same and make a hard right and take one tree out and ask
I mean,
for?
we're just creating
ask for,
hypotheticals now that we don't even know are going to happen.
At the end of the day,
Correct.
if they came in later on with whatever hypothetical it is, you'd have to consider it, but you don't have to grant it. And my position would be, if you're seeking a revision to the site plan so you can make that southern parcel developable, they've got to ask you for that revision, and you would be able to deny it.
I mean, I've been pretty vocal against this project right from the beginning. However, based on, thank you, Stephanie, that was very helpful as far as the history and the background from the ZBA, the considerations. but based on the variance from the ZBA and the fact that they have the approval essentially for the outdoor area for the playground. And as far as the parking goes, they meet our statute, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Okay. So with all that said, I mean, they meet the criteria. I don't like it. I don't think it's a great project. I think they could have done a better job. But as far as I'm concerned, based on the ZBA decision and based on what they've presented to us, it's legal. And I would hate to, as much as I'd like to vote no on this, I think if we turn it down, it is going to go probably to circuit court, and I don't think we're going to prevail. So with that said, I'd have to support this, reluctantly support this project.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll add, and
I'm sorry,
Oh.
And I agree with you 100% as far as there's a lot of hypotheticals here, and we don't know what's going to be presented in the future. And we can come up with all sorts of possibilities, but until something is presented to us, we really can't hypothetically make any decisions on that, although we can certainly make it very clear that we have that ability to say no, as you had said, Dirk. If we don't like it, I mean, it's a very small piece of property. They're going to have a very difficult time doing anything with it.
You do have that.
So if there's no other discussion, is there, or, sorry, you want?
yeah, no, I'm prepared to make a motion, and the only thing I'll add is, originally I was also had concerns about the project, and that was why the variance was contingent on 44 students on the playground, which that's what they're allowed to have. If there's more than 44, then they're violating their variance and they can be fined for doing so. With that said, I'm going to move that we approve the site plan and special land use for Primrose Daycare at 6255 Telegraph Road.
We have a motion by trustee Field.
Could I suggest adding the 4 conditions that are listed in the staff report too?
Yes, and with the conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dirk.
Motion by trustee Faki,
Support.
support by trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Roll call?
You know which one it is.
Well, there are 2.
Oh, there's
You didn't
2?
even-
See, I didn't know.
That's why we do roll.
Sorry.
Trustee Faki,
Yes.
Trustee Kalinsky,
Nay.
Treasurer Shostak,
Yes.
Trustee Barnett,
Yes.
Trustee Murray.
No.
I am a yes.
And a yes. So that does
Thank you.
pass 5-2.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Take that offline.
So now we have considering approval of the revised site plan for Legacy Hills, proposed patio plan, 3901 through 336. Legacy Hills Drive, presented by Patti Voelker. Before she even goes into this, I want to thank the board as well as the 2 sides that have been working on this. This came before, I think only one person on this board was on here when this started. And then we came in the middle, and we've been all trying to work together to fix this. So I want to thank both sides for coming together. It was a true thing that you guys spent a lot of hours, a lot of weeks, a lot of months. So we'll have Patti today, but thank you everybody who was involved.
So good evening, Patti Voelker with Planning, Building, and Ordinance. This is a revisit, if you will. This item was before you on November 13th, 2023, when the board heard a presentation from Legacy Hills wanting the board to consider allowing for patios to be part of their site plan. I think we're familiar with the location, identified off of Squirrel. The property is zoned single family. And the development is nearly complete, if you will. So since November of 2023, there's been several discussions between the applicant as well as the abutting Woodcrest Lake Subdivision representatives. Clearly, by the motion of the Township Board, you're wanting to see some sort of a compromise or communication between the 2 communities, and the board tabled it to allow for that to occur, suggesting even a February 12th date. Well, since that time, I noted that their February 1st The supervisor facilitated a meeting with representatives from the Legacy Hills Association, the Woodcrest Lake Subdivision, and their respective attorneys. And at such time, there's also representatives from the Township Planning, Building, Ordinance Department, Engineering, Environmental Services, and the Township Attorney. And through the course of that discussion, there was some conclusions, if you will, that were determined based on the discussion that took place that highlighted the following. Legacy Hills Association to plant 15 8-foot Norway pine trees to span along Unit 7, which is 3930 Legacy Hills, and through to Unit 8, which is 3934 Legacy Hills, and across the end of the Legacy Hills Drive cul-de-sac. And so the area that is being referenced is that northerly portion as evidenced on the updated plan. They also, at that meeting, there was discussions regarding the significance of that screening for the potential of view of building elevations and headlights toward the northerly abutting neighbors. And also speaking to specific future decks and patios, that they be limited to 14 feet in depth, and that there'd be an agreement between Legacy Hills Association and Woodcrest Lake Subdivision to maintain these terms and conditions. The reference to recording was not a condition of that discussion. That is being omitted as part of the presentation this evening. So following up that meeting, we did receive this revised as-built site plan that was picking up on some factors that were brought up last year in November, having to do with 2 downspout outlets and 2 sprinkler heads, specifically behind unit number 9, which is 3933 Legacy Hills Drive, to be moved to a compliant location outside the 25-foot natural feature setback of Wetlands A. This revised as-built site plan does show now the boundary of the Wetland A. It shows the natural feature setback, and also identifies those intrusions that were called out. A residential building permit application is required to be submitted to the township for approval for removal of those encroachments. That notation is found clouded, if you will, in black on the plan, and that the disturbed area following removal of those items to remain as grass to grow to its natural state and not be mowed. That also is a reflection on the plan. So also, part of the proposal that was presented starting in November was defining what the limits of disturbance boundary on the revised as-built site plan. And the really impacted area is that area behind Unit 9. And that's the reflection of making sure that we have a representation of the wetland boundary, the natural feature setback boundary, also the indication of what Wetland A, and then indicating in these notations here that any intrusions are going to be removed as we discussed earlier, or I referenced earlier in the discussions that led to those being called out and updated on this plan. So there is the request of the applicant is to acknowledge that new or updated limits of disturbance, which is that blue line, which is behind Unit 9. So following the discussion, March 5th, we did have a opportunity to go out to the Legacy Hills site to look at the documentation that was provided, specifically to the area to the north, and I'm just going to jump to the screening, and that was a point of concern regarding our February 1st meeting. And at that discussion, specifically looking at that northerly boundary of Legacy Hills to the abutting neighbors, that there be some vegetation. This is what was presented. This was the area discussed during the course of the items at February 1st with the several parties. And the directive was that the Planning, Building, and Ordinance Department would determine the location of those 15 8-foot Norway pine trees. And so we met with Township's landscape architect, Tim Shoemaker of Michael J. Doolin Associates, at the Legacy Hills cul-de-sac to conduct that site inspection, specifically to address the screening that was part of the discussion. Michael J. Doolin provided a report that identifies the siting of those 15 8-foot evergreen trees in the area specified, to provide for that screening, and also given the existing tree locations that are already there. As a result of that discussion, they provided the approximate locations of those 15 8-foot Norway spruce trees. The documentation provided by Michael J. Doolin is that these locations be staked by Legacy Hills Association first to receive township approval of the planting locations prior to the installation of the trees, and communication was received from some abutting property owners on Crest Lake Drive, and we did provide that in your packet this evening. The other point that was raised as part of the joint discussion on February 1st is that there'd be an agreement between Legacy Hills Association and the Woodcrest Lake Subdivision to maintain those terms and conditions that were identified at that meeting. And I'm happy to note that this evening the township did receive a fully executed agreement signed and dated April 8th by both Woodcrest Lakes Property Owner Association and Legacy Hills Condominium Association, identifying conditions in terms that they are, as a private agreement, that they are acknowledging, and in respect to that, led to further discussion with the proposal. And if I could go back to the site plan. The conditions relevant to the report that was presented to the township in November called out that as this is a request to allow for patios to be included with deck, in addition to decks, as options for these residents, and that there was a summary, if you will, of the unit numbers or the addresses and the dimensions provided on this as-built in a chart identifying decks and patios, that the applicant, the representatives from the two associations call out their acknowledgement of the allowance of the existing patios to remain in their existing locations, specific to those that have been highlighted and identified on the plan. They would be considered approved along with the existing decks for this Legacy Hills site plan. In the documentation, at the time back in November, it was requested that it also include a proposed 16-foot by 50-foot patio for Unit 16. That address is 3905 Legacy Hills. Since that time, we also have received communication from representatives of the property owner that they are no longer seeking a proposed 16-foot by 50-foot patio. They are removing that request, and they are happy to seek a future deck in compliance with the township provisions for Legacy Hills. So the other condition that's referenced is to allow, based on the agreement that we have with the associations, to allow future patios or decks to be limited to a maximum of 14 feet in depth by 60 feet in width. In essence, mirroring the prior approval for decks that happened back in 2019. So the plan is called out that there would be, or the suggestion would be that there would be a alteration of this 2/12/24 revised site plan to remove the reference and the red line notes of the proposed patio, and thereby, as an applicant would be, should this proceed and approved by the board, that the applicant for Unit 16, as long as it complied with the terms and conditions and approvals based on the township board, that they would seek a building permit in compliance with those standards. It's important to note that neither the existing patios nor the future patios or decks, for that matter, do not extend into the limits of disturbance as identified on either the original 2016 approved site plan or even the current that are identified in this 24 as amended behind Unit 9. Another factor as part of this site plan, in addition to referencing the change in the limits of disturbance, the acknowledgement of the existing patios, the terms under which the intrusions into the natural feature setback would be removed, is based on an application being made to the Planning, Building, and Ordinance Department as a residential building permit, is that the retaining wall behind unit number 8, which is 3936 Legacy Hills Drive, that be screened. And the applicant has provided screening for that 6.8 foot retaining wall. Just to refresh your memory, under the open space provisions, the township board acts as the ZBA, if you will, for any provisions that do not comply with the terms and conditions of the ordinance, that you have that authority to grant those allowances. And so I just want to make sure that that is called out, that it is recommended that the board consider that as part of this site plan. No changes have been made relevant to the discussions and referencing certainly through the Engineering and Environmental Services Department, that as part of the revised as-built plan, all of the discussion relating to the analysis chart having to do with the amount of impervious surface, the existing impervious surface versus the proposed, all is summarized in a report that we received in HRC that said that there is no major impact on the drainage or grading from their engineering analysis. And even our Township Engineering and Environmental Services Department found the same conclusions, that the stormwater management plan addressing site drainage will be maintained by the proposed impervious surface area. And additionally, it was called out that it would actually be a reduction that was previously approved should each unit be completely built out. The terms and the comments that were made by the fire department, police department, and just as I mentioned from engineering, have not changed since you saw those in November. So tonight, as a modification based on the most recent information that's been received as of even by 7 p.m. this evening, is that based on the information presented, the agreement between Legacy Hills Condominium Association and Woodcrest Lakes Property Owners Association, it is recommended that the Township Board determine under what conditions an amended open space preservation site plan dated February 12, 2024 may be approved up for the Legacy Hills development with consideration of the following. And this is different than the report that you have, so this is a little nuance based on this newest information. Number 1, we're asking for you to consider to approve the existing patios identified on the submitted as-built site plan to remain subject to application for all necessary residential building permits be made within 60 days to the Planning, Building, and Ordinance Department. Also approving the 6.8 foot retaining wall of Unit 8 as permitted per Section 42-3.9.5, and maintaining the screening by the 5 existing evergreen trees subject to application for all necessary permits be made within 60 days to the Planning, Building, and Ordinance Department. Conditions of approval to be included. Residential building permit application is required to be submitted to the township for approval prior to removal of the 2 downspouts and 2 sprinkler heads off the southwest corner of Unit 9 and move to a compliant location outside of the 25-foot natural feature setback of Wetland A. B, the disturbed area within the natural feature setback of Wetland A to be allowed to remain grass to grow to its natural state with boundary staking so it's not to be mowed. C, Legacy Hills Association will stake the trees and receive township approval of the planting locations prior to Legacy Hills installation of the 15 8-foot Norway pine trees. Submission of an updated as-built site plan that removes the quote proposed patio notation and the red line dimensions shown at the rear of Unit 16. And that be one motion to consider.
Do you by any chance have that on your computer? You can put it up for people to see? Or do you have a projector or anything to put it up so that if somebody does end up making a motion, they can see the changes that were made?
Maybe we can pull up the agenda. Oh, no.
The
my agenda.
new one.
I can give you mine. We can put it up on the,
So that people, because there was a lot to take in of the new stuff, so I just want to see if we can get it up there.
DocuCam. We can do it under that.
It's easier to sometimes visually see it. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you for your help.
Perfect. That's the there. That works. That's a lot more help. That way people, it's easier sometimes to digest.
Sure. No, that's a great idea. And then the second motion to address all that, was presented as of this evening is to approve any future patios or decks to be limited to a maximum of 14 feet in depth and 60 feet in width, subject to required setbacks and application for all necessary permits to be made to the Planning, Building, and Ordinance Department. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And we do have both sides here as well to answer any questions. Instead of doing presentations, since they came together and we're able to get that, we figure we could just have a discussion. And if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add, Patty did a great job, obviously, is you're really doing two things. You're approving the amended site plan, subject to the various conditions that Patty mentioned, and also deleting the request for the 16-foot patio from Unit 16. That's the first motion you're making. And then the second motion would be to make a motion to address future decks and decks or patios to limit them to 14 feet deep by 60 feet wide. So those are the two motions you're being asked to address tonight. I will say that there was a lot of collaboration between both the Woodcrest Hills and Mr. Axt and Legacy Hills and their respective attorneys, Phil Vestovich and Bradley Knickerbocker, and certainly the township. It was a long time getting here, but I think we're here, and I think I speak on behalf of staff that we would certainly recommend the township board implement what has finally been reached here today, which I think was the intent of the township board back in, I guess it was November when it was adjourned. So.
My only question is that when we had all of our discussions and we spent quite a few hours and days together, this all was like contingent on each other. So do we have it separated? Because again, the whole thing was to fix it and not make people rip things up if we don't go forward at 14 feet. So even though they're separated, is there a danger of that now that they're separated?
No.
Okay.
I mean, theoretically you could make one motion.
Could we? I would feel safer if it's all rolled into one.
You can just make one motion.
For it all being one.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine.
And then considering where we started in November to where we are now, again, I want to commend the homeowners and the residents of Legacy Hills, homeowners association, the attorneys, our staff, of course, because it's, as you mentioned, I'm the only one who was here at the beginning on the board, so I know the history. It was quite contentious early on, and so I'm very pleased to see how well you work together on this and to get everybody to where we're at now.
And this also, by them having this agreement, it protects them that not every 4 years they don't have to keep coming back. Because I know when we came on, we voted no, but again, there were still 5, and then now so it just takes the ambiguity of every 4 years coming back for the same thing. Does anybody else have any questions?
I just had one question. We had comments from one of the neighbors with regard to the retaining wall at Unit 8. Would it be possible to add additional screening there? Do you know?
That I don't know, because that was not part of our site inspection with the landscape architect.
Okay.
We were focused on the area that we were called upon.
Okay, thank you.
Which one? Yeah.
Just looking at the motion, I noticed, and this is my mistake because I looked at it earlier, I think we need to add an additional condition, maybe an E, that the contract be part of it.
Yeah,
Acknowledgement of the contract?
Yeah.
actually, I already had that in there.
And that's my fault because I reviewed this earlier today and I missed it. But just looking at it now, I realize it's
Or
not.
as we work together well.
That's why we got a few of you attorneys here to help
So
us.
it should be added as E.
I got it.
So better late than never, I guess. Right?
Right. So Stephanie, you had a.
No, I'm done.
And so basically, again, what we do is we came together and said, they don't want to remove any, they want more, and they came together and said, what is something that we can talk about removing, what should stay? So the groups themselves kind of determined where they came to with this. We made the suggestion of 15 trees. We made the suggestion of 15 trees. We made the suggestion of no more going forward, but they worked together past that 3-hour initial meeting and other meetings to work on this themselves. And I appreciate both of them for coming together on that right now. Are there any more questions?
There's
for
hands
that?
up in the, from the
I know,
two.
but this is for you guys if you have questions, but again, we're not doing presentations tonight. We're trying to keep this at a, they've already gotten their things together, so this is more of if you have questions, they're here to answer them. But we're talking about this motion based on everything they've done up till tonight.
So am I right in saying that the fact that they worked together and came to this proposal, that Patty,
They signed it and gave it to Patty.
that everybody on both sides is happy with this agreement?
I don't think anybody's totally happy, or else you
Well,
didn't
in
negotiate.
agreement, okay.
They wouldn't have been negotiating if they were both happy.
But
so.
they agreed.
So
They agreed, it's okay.
Perfect, everybody's
They
not
have-
happy.
They have
Right?
come to this agreement.
Correct.
That's what I want to know, because, as a trustee, we're not as deeply involved on a day-to-day basis. So
You will never have 100% of both sides 100% happy. You're definitely going to get a couple people that aren't happy.
Well, sure.
But the majority of both sides voted. Each one went to their boards.
Well, and I
went to
see all
their
the
people.
all the representatives are here present with us, so I just
Yeah.
didn't know if it's we're all just like okay with this, or anybody else has anything else they want to say before we vote.
No, this is if you have specific questions for them. Otherwise,
I have a specific motion.
okay, before.
I have
More questions.
I have a question of perhaps the attorneys representing each side, and you just perhaps answered it too, which is we have an HOA representing, binding the members, the people who live in that community signing this contract. We have the condos signing this, purporting to bind all of the members of the condo. Can each of you, I just want to understand what authority these two entities are acting under. Did the boards vote? Did the members vote?
Do you want to
Is
ask?
there-
Can you ask Dirk, because he'll have the answer for you.
Yeah, I believe when I was looking at all the emails during the course of all the negotiations, that both of the HOA boards approved it, the agreement.
Both took it to their groups.
And they took it to their group? And the individuals,
There were
homeowners and
multiple
condo
homeowner
owners?
meetings.
Well, they wouldn't necessarily have to take it to the individual homeowners, because the homeowners would be governed by the HOA
They
board.
I
did
wouldn't
have-
necessarily, I'm just asking
They
what
had
happened, how did it work?
meetings where people showed up just like we do. Not all 45,000 are here, but the ones that showed up today are who they worked with. Do you want to allow them both up here?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Okay, both of the attorneys. So
it
we
helps.
have Bradley and Brian.
Just to make it really, I think clear, Phil, you can say, or Brian, Legacy Hills Condo Association owns all the land on which any deck or patio would be built. So they're not necessarily binding their owners, they're binding themselves as a condo association. As it relates to the homeowners association, there are no obligations other than to support what we agreed to. And after that, there's no obligations for the HOA. There's nothing for the HOA to do except if somebody comes forward and says, I want a 16-foot deck in a year, the HOA has a right to do something about that. But there are no obligations. And the board did approve. Both boards.
That's correct. Both boards approved.
Okay, thank you.
That's really the bottom line.
I just want to make one note before maybe the motion is made. We did have in the agreement that Unit 17 had been previously approved and would not need to seek approval. That's not,
the
it's
model
not quite,
home.
it's not quite in this.
But
So
that's
if we could just add that slight amendment.
Well, it's listed as you have it as everything that's pre-existing.
What I acknowledged was that we wanted to make sure that every deck and every patio had a permit and part of the approval, so we have a record in the township. So should there be existing permits approved already, obviously decks, then we will acknowledge that. Those who do not have a permit and an application, those we would be reviewing under a residential building permit. So that being said, we can acknowledge that 17 was part of a prior permit and an as-built approval.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to make the motion.
Yep.
Thank you.
Question?
I comment.
Okay.
I want to applaud the two groups for coming together. Again, the best thing for us was for our neighbors to come together and come to consensus. I know it wasn't hard, and I know my trustee Murray over here thinks everybody was happy. They're not. I appreciate you guys coming together. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of effort. So I do appreciate it. Thank you guys very much.
Agreed. Second that.
Any other questions, comments, or a motion?
Make a motion that, first of all, we approve the amended site plan. Also that we incorporate all the conditions that Patti has presented to us, including E, the acknowledgement of the executed agreement between the parties. Do we need to put anything in there about Unit 17, Dirk? We're good, we're covered. And then the only question I have, is that sufficient, or do we have to do anything with Part 2?
I think you could simply say that, too, that you're adopting the motions 1 and 2 as is.
Okay, so I'm adopting the motion 1 and 2 as is, along with, as I said, the executed agreement between the parties.
Motion by trustee
Support.
Arnett, support by trustee Kalinsky. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Good work.
So next we have considering approval of the amended site plan for the proposed internal drives at Franklin Woods Subdivision, 7141 Franklin Road and Bloomfield Hills Mills, 7010. We have Patti for this one. Hold on, we'll give it a minute. Hey, you guys. Bradley, Brian, can you guys take your group out? Sorry. Thank you. Okay. So next we have that, and we have Director Voelker here, and we also have the builder, Terry Nelson, is here as well for questions.
Yes, so the developer for Bloomfield Mill Development, which comprises Franklin Woods and Bloomfield Mill subdivisions, has submitted a letter that's part of your packet requesting approval of the revised site plan that proposes an internal drive both on the Franklin Woods subdivision, and that's the area defined in gray, which is found on private property, as well as on Bloomfield Mill, which is across the street for the two lots. Just to highlight the description, it's intended to serve the connectivity of the individual driveways assigned to each of the 9 lots. If you remember, there are joint access from Franklin to the individual sites. And this also identifies both locations. It is intended to be 20-foot wide, considered to be an internal drive, parallel to Franklin Road. It's intended to reduce the potential for congestion of traffic interruptions along Franklin, and also and for traffic movements along Franklin Road in this area, and also to provide alternate routes for the future homeowners, and then some services that are called out, whether it's trash mail delivery and so forth. The developer has a PowerPoint presentation to call out his due diligence, if you will, in reaching out to Priority Waste and their comments and support should they be able to adequately maneuver their vehicles. Also, this has been discussed with the Road Commission of Oakland County. They acknowledge that this is outside their jurisdiction because it's on private property. However, there are those right-of-way permit applications that are required for those curb cuts. That, remember, those combined curb cuts that were part of the approval, and those permits have been provided to the township as recent as this morning. So all of those have been provided, and we just wanted to call out that as this is part of our subdivision control review and provisions, that internal drives do not meet the definitions of the driveway, road, streets, and so forth as defined. So this is not intended to be, a vehicular access to a single zoning lot. Thereby, we're calling it an internal drive. The various departments have reviewed this. The fire department found no issue. It, however, noted some posting that would be necessary on the drive itself, and engineering provided individual reports for your consideration, both specific to Franklin Woods and Bloomfield Mill. They've summarized that there's no objection to these proposed internal drives. Specific to Franklin Woods, it was noted that the proposed drive is partially located over the township's sanitary sewer system for Franklin Woods, so there'll have to be an assurance that the manhole covers are brought to grade. And for Bloomfield Mill, the proposed internal drive is located over a platted private easement for storm sewer and surface drainage, and the developer will be required to maintain that existing drainage pattern and allow continuous passage of stormwater drainage through that easement area. So with those conditions, the board is being asked to consider the information presented in your packet that you will hear from the developer, and consider under what conditions approval may be approved with the revision to the plan for those internal drives, acknowledging the conditions by the township departments relevant to the manhole covers are brought to grade for Franklin Woods, maintain the existing drainage patterns to allow continuous passage of stormwater drainage through the easement for Bloomfield Mill, acknowledging the submission of the right-of-way permits that has been received for those drive approaches off of Franklin Road, and also any necessary permits prior to construction would be necessary. So with that, I can answer any questions, and Mr. Nosen is here to give his presentation.
You want to go ahead and add yours, and then we can add questions? Terry, did you want to go ahead?
Good evening, Terry Nosen, 32,000 Northwestern, Suite 195. Excuse my voice, a little laryngitis this weekend. Yeah. I'm here on behalf as the proprietor of the Franklin Woods Associates of the two plats we're talking about. And Patti did a great job putting all this together in the packet, but in the interests of time, I don't know how many of you really want to walk through the whole PowerPoint here. I think I can summarize it pretty well, and then if there are questions, we could get into some of these particulars. But while the connecting drives may seem like a novel concept, they've actually existed in the township and other nearby cities and villages for a long time. I personally live in a development of 4 units where we have 2 curb cuts onto the major road and connecting drives, and we all love it because we don't have to go out to the main road for trash, mail delivery, things of that nature. And it gives us extra parking on our site for when we have guests, even though we keep one side not parked as the fire marshal would like here. As Patti mentioned, these have been accepted as either beneficial or preferred by all the agencies and entities that have looked at our plan. So one of the interesting things when I was doing some work on these was looking at the township's master transportation plan, which encourages developments that will result in fewer driveways and access to parcels off of service drives, frontage roads, and shared driveways. What we're doing here is pretty consistent with that. The reason for that is it enhances safety by reducing trips to and from the various homes and stopped or slow vehicles on the main roads, which means reduced likelihood of collisions. Utilizing these connecting driveways provides a benefit to the township residents. No trash cans, mail trucks, less likely parking on the shoulder, and other activity on Franklin Road, and to the residents of the development, as it's easy vehicular and pedestrian access to neighbors without leaving and re-entering via Franklin Road, and the increased on-site parking. So really, we think it's a win-win for the township and everybody who drives on Franklin Road, as well as our homeowners. And we would appreciate your concurrence on that.
Anybody have any questions?
Anything
So-
more?
This is a private road, right? It would be a private road if
Yeah,
it was approved.
we've provided in our covenants and restrictions that this, there's, we call reciprocal easements between the various homeowners, and the maintenance of it would be part of the homeowners association, which has been formed. It's just actually getting incorporated in the next few days, but the restrictions create the homeowner association and set forth the maintenance responsibilities.
Yeah, our plow trucks won't be touching them.
No.
Just want that on record.
Well, in addition to the fact that we wouldn't plow it, this is all private property and it's the joint residence shared driveways. So when it came to things like 20 years from now, it would not be an SAD, it would just be like they have to replace their own driveway. It would be their responsibility.
Correct. That's and that's set forth in the restrictions that this part of the driveway, the lateral connecting part, the homeowners association takes responsibility. And then as each home comes off of this driveway, they take responsibility for their own.
Any other questions?
No, I had the opportunity to see Terry's development on Inkster, just south of 14. It's a great project, the way development, the way it was set up. It does keep traffic in that situation off of Inkster, but here we're talking about Franklin, which has a lot more traffic. Cars are going faster. There's a hill there. I remember when we talked about when you first presented this to the Planning Commission and the board, that was an issue of the curb cuts. And this is one way to eliminate all of those curb cuts, and certainly it's convenient for the homeowners in a lot of ways. And most important to me is I think it is certainly makes it much safer because of Franklin Road.
Yeah, my little graphic that Patti has up there tells you even though we have more curb cuts than we need, you know, Oakland County would have liked us to get rid of the 3 in the middle, but that's not how the ordinance goes as far as access. But even though we have more than we need, I believe I'm accurately showing that the kind of traffic that can stay on the site on the bottom versus what ends up coming in and out and making turning movements onto Franklin Road on the top if they're not connected.
Any other questions? If not, I look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve it as requested.
Motion by trustee Kalinsky, support by trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass.
Thank you. Be in time for the tip-off now.
Terry, the project's looking good.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Next, we have also Director Patti Voelker for the Planning, Building, and Ordinance Department Annual Report.
So I'm pleased to present to you the 2023 annual reports of the Planning Division, Building Division, and Ordinance Division. This actually is a requirement in the Planning Commission bylaws that every year we present to you an annual report. And the Planning Commission forwards on to you, their yearly activity, if you will. So that did occur at their meeting on February 19th. And it was unanimously supported to accept and forward this report on to the Township Board for your acceptance. I would like to extend special thanks to Kelly Jacobson and Sharon Van Horn from Planning, Building, Ordinance, who assembles this information and puts this together, as it truly is very comprehensive. As much as I would love to read every single word of this into the record and show as many illustrations as possible, just to summarize, and I think this is the case in all three divisions, but I can always answer specific questions, is that there is still a consistent level of activity that's occurring in each of the three divisions. There may be some fluctuation in some of the general categories of a slight reduction from a previous year total, but then there'll be an area that actually we're seeing an increase. And for example, we're seeing a lower number of building permits for new residents, but we're seeing an increase in building additions and alterations. The Sylvan Lake also, because as you know, we do perform those inspection services as part of a contract agreement since 2011. They have increased activity as well. And across the board, you can see even reflection of the items that went to the Zoning Board of Appeals through the Planning Division's reports, and even the enforcement activity through the Ordinance Division, with some uptick in some ordinance permits and also ordinance enforcement, that there is still a high level activity occurring in the township, either reflected through permits, applications, or enforcement activities. So we are very, very fortunate to have outstanding boards and commissions that serve the township. The Planning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Design Review Board are exceptional and highly dedicated to review the documentation that's submitted. Their attendance is obviously above reproach, and so I also need to call out appreciation of our boards and commissions and our volunteers, because it is one of the best I think in the state, if I could be a little boastful of the dedication of those board members. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions, or if you could make a motion to accept, I'd appreciate that too. Any questions?
Well, I'll just say, well, part of what makes ZBA great is the staff. So certainly we couldn't do without you, and we appreciate all of the work that you and your department do.
And they do even more than we get to see, because I get to be in a lot of meetings and you already do a lot, but knowing that to prepare for those meetings, there's so many hours that go into everything. Your staff is amazing. So I really appreciate everything that you do, because we always throw in, hey, what about this? The board thought this, and you guys roll with it every time.
Yeah,
so thank
Andrea,
you.
Bibby, and Kelly Jacobson are doing incredible with the Zoning Board of Appeals. You all know we're looking for a planner. We have a vacancy, and that is quite a challenge. So we've appreciated some patience, but we also understand that the workload is still there, and it's ongoing, so we're still trying to fill that important position.
And even the way you guys have changed to think out of the box, like you've added ordinance officers sometimes on the weekend, because people got used to put in the signs on Thursday night, take them out Sunday. So we now have spot checking ordinance on weekends. You're consistently, whether it's part-time inspectors that have retired and come back, whether it's the shared services with Rochester or anything. I appreciate that you and your team are always looking for new ways to make it better. So thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. We'll continue on.
And again, I thank you for being accessible. I'm always able to call you or Andrew whenever I have an issue or something in the board packet. You guys always make yourself available. And while I know you guys are looking for a planner, I appreciate the fact that we don't lower our standards if it doesn't make sense. So again, we have high standards, and you guys have high standards in your department, and we make sure the people that we're going to hire maintain that standard. So even though we're still vacant for that position, we're not willing to lower our standards here in Bloomfield just to get a body. You guys are willing to keep that high standard, and that is what I really appreciate. So thank you guys very much.
If you'd like to help out anytime, Chris, just come out. We can set you up.
Before I make a motion, I'll just echo what Stephanie had to say. One of the reasons I enjoy being on the Planning Commission, and I've been on for quite a while, is your staff, of course the people on the Planning Commission, but your staff give so much background and make the job so much easier because we have all the information we need. And it's always been a pleasure working with the two of you. So,
Yeah, we make a good team.
yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the report as submitted.
Support.
Motion by trustee Barnett, support by trustee Murray. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass. One more for Patti, and again, this is one of those things that we throw out there. So we have a discussion about the liquor license discussion by Patti. We'll start with Patti and Dirk, and then kind of open up if you want to go over your plan, and then talk about some of the things that we've missed out on, some of the things that are coming, and
Sure. So we were asked to provide an overview, and knowing that we could definitely dig in deeper, and certainly didn't want to spend that level of analysis, but just bringing to the board's attention that we do have very specific uses that are called out in our zoning ordinance that do allow liquor licenses. And for your reference, I identified currently we have 6 uses that are specified in our zoning ordinance for a license of some specificity. Restaurants with a Class C or tavern license, theater with a Class C or tavern license, retail wine shop with a tavern license, banquet halls of a country club, automobile service stations for off-premise consumption, and then retail package outlets for off-premise consumptions. So of those 6 descriptions, there are very specific standards that have to be met to be able to comply and go forward and seek that liquor license. If a use does allow for a liquor license, there's a dual review process where they have to comply with the zoning ordinance provisions, go through a site plan application, and also go through a liquor license application process through the clerk's office. Those are disseminated to boards for their review, for their input, specific the supervisor, police, fire, building, planning and ordinance. Police department conducts an investigation of the owners and the premises. The building department research any open permits or outstanding inspections. The fire department conducts a fire safety review. And all of those reports are then compiled for township board to hold a review of a liquor license application for consideration. With a Class C or a tavern license, those are considered quota licenses, and they also are considered a special land use. So you do have a planning commission recommendation that's forwarded on as coupled with that liquor license that would be ultimately considered by this body. And when those quota licenses are considered, it is based on the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, MLCC, provisions specific that Class Cs or taverns are based on on-premise consumption for every 1,500 of population. So based on the township's current population, 30 on-premise licenses are allowed, with 25 issued and 5 available in Bloomfield Township. The township board also requires a liquor license agreement. That's fairly new to the township, and that specifically was designed to safeguard the license from being transferred out of the township, because we do have that quota limit. For retail package outlets, they may seek an SDD, or specially designated distributor license, to sell packaged liquor, or they can seek a special designated merchant, or SDM, license to sell beer and wine only for consumption off premises. The SDD, or specially designated distributor license, is issued by the MLCC for every 3,000 of population, again a quota. Presently we have 15 SDD allowed with 15 issued, so we're at 0. For a special designated merchant's license, the SDM, that sells beer and wine for consumption off premises, it is also a quota license for every 1,000 of population. 45 are allowed, 19 issued, and there's 26 available in Bloomfield Township. So we provided a summary for you that is available to the township to see where we are and where we stand, as their records are kept at the MLCC. Through the years, we have received a variety of inquiries regarding liquor licenses for specific business uses. And in some cases, it's for businesses that are not identified specifically in our zoning ordinance. Just more recently, we've had Tea Time, who is a golf simulator indoor recreational restaurant use. So it's a lot of words, but that we don't have recognition in our zoning ordinance. Retail art classes that want to offer beer and wine. Maybe painting with a twist or something that you might have heard of. A pickleball clubs with member restaurants. Want to be more similar?
Pickleball.
Indoor
Some of them are
pickleball.
fighting
Yes.
about noise.
Yes. Indoor pickleball. And then even over and above those new uses, if you want to speak to that, are also, and more recently, we've been asked and approached by several gas station owners who have wanted the township to consider or maybe reconsider the standards by which a gas station, or as we refer to as automobile service stations, can offer off-premise sales of liquor. That ordinance was passed in 2010, and it was very specific as to what standards had to be met to be able to comply with those provisions. And since 2010, we have not processed an application for approval to meet those standards before the Township Board. Many of which we've heard is that property owners are challenged to meet the minimum standards specific to building size. 4,000 square foot is required in our ordinance presently, and or the minimum lot size of 1 acre. And several factors play into that inability to meet those standards, some of which has to do with trying to meet that 4,000 square foot building size, and it also meet all the other standards such as parking requirements. And depending on its location, if it's a corner lot, now you have several curb cuts that traffic flow could impede the parking layout and thereby not be able to comply. And in some instances, just having the limitation of not being able to provide that 1 acre minimum. So in looking at our 12 gas stations in the township, 8 actually are considered conforming, which means that they fall in the B3 district. But we have 4 that have been approved or in existence in the B1 district, and those are considered non-conforming. So anytime those 4 ever want to do anything with their property that enlarges, expands, or increases the activity level, they always have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals because they have to. They are considered non-conforming locations. And the other overview that we provided is beyond just Bloomfield Township. What are other communities doing? And it was very interesting to see. And I just grabbed those that came to our discussion. Was the City of Rochester Hills. They actually established a liquor license review committee made up of staff, but also members at large and so forth. And they're required to review and make a recommendation to their city council about liquor license. And parallel to that is they also require a conditional use permit, which is their terminology for special land use. And that application has to go through their planning process, ultimately then combined going to their city council. And in that instance, the recommendation then is specific to that application and that use before them. The city of Novi, they also have a liquor license application, of course. It goes through a site plan and land use approval through the form of an administrative committee, is what they refer to it. And it's members of their various departments: community development, public works, assessing, and all of those comments are then forwarded on to their city council as part of a recommendation. And another example is the city of Ferndale. They also have a liquor license review body that makes recommendations to their city council. In that instance, it is comprised of the city manager's office, community and economic development department, Department of Public Works, police department, fire department, and downtown development authority if it's within that district, and 1 member of city council. And so their liquor license review board makes a recommendation to the city council to approve or deny. What I found interesting too, so it's not necessarily including a new review body that's part of the analysis that's bringing forward a recommendation to you, but also how they look at liquor sales within their zoning ordinance specifically. And as we know, unless it's identified specifically as a use within a zone district, unless it's so stated, it's not presumed to be approved. So when I saw that, for example, Rochester Hills, they use a very broad approach, and they actually have a category that says alcohol beverage sales for on-premise consumption, accessory to a permitted use. So they don't even tie a specific use to that alcohol sales. It is permitted as long as it's a conditional use and a conditional use process. It's permitted to be applied for, I should say, as a conditional use, but it has to go through a review process, as opposed to listing very specific standards. And as part of, in that specific example, when they are assessing whether under the review of a conditional use, what type of value does adding that liquor license to that business provide the township? And that seems to be the basis for many of their questions that they have. They have actually a questionnaire that's part of their application form. So I am sure there's dozens of other examples throughout the state that can be called upon, as every community maybe has looked upon this differently, but want to at least present that to the township board, that there are other alternatives other than what we are presently doing that you might want to have a discussion of. So based on whatever discussion that you may have, I'm suggesting, because we do have someone who is interested in pursuing the golf simulator indoor recreational restaurant use, that you consider voting on a recommendation to the Planning Commission to consider a discussion of making some amendments to that classification. Also, amending the automobile service station standards based on the conversation that you're going to have this evening. Forward on to the Planning Commission for them to consider amendments to see if there are standards that could be altered or reconsidered, if you will, relevant to lot size and building size, and forward on a recommendation to you. And then lastly, consider rewriting the entire manner in which we consider liquor licenses, maybe as approaching a committee, such as a local liquor license review committee, to further vet or review a recommendation beyond the Planning Commission, so as to provide even further analysis and recommendations for the board ultimately to make that final decision. So I leave that up to you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know Dirk and I have been having a lot of discussions about this over the last several months.
Patti did a great job again, obviously. The only thing I would add is that most municipalities that I've looked at don't do it the way Bloomfield Township does. It's very rare to have a municipality allocate what kind, to say liquor licenses are limited to a particular kind of a use. Most municipalities are more broad-based, basically saying we'll consider virtually any use to ask for a liquor license. But then in order to get the license, you've got to meet a number of fairly strict requirements. West Bloomfield does it just the way that Rochester Hills and Novi do it. Auburn Hills is even looser than that. They don't even really regulate the use at all in any way, shape, or form. But the problem is the way that we've done it traditionally is we have those 5 or 6 uses specified in their zoning ordinance, and consequently you end up losing a lot of potentially really excellent establishments because it's so narrow. You don't lose any ability to control it if you have something more broad-based, because you would make the restrictions within that approach. But what would happen is you wouldn't lose some of these potentially creative and new uses that could be really great for the township to have, such as a tea time. That's a perfect example. It's not called out in our ordinance, so it's not allowed to get a liquor license. If you had a more broad-based approach, those kind of uses would be eligible for it, provided they can meet all the other requirements. So it's limiting the way, and I've been around long enough to, for years and years and years, the township wanted it that way. They wanted to limit the use of liquor licenses. years ago, Birmingham wanted to do that, and they loosened it up, and Birmingham's still Birmingham, and so I won't go any further than that. Just to say that the way that we've been doing it traditionally for years and years and years is really unusual. It's not how most municipalities do it, and I think there's a loss of some good businesses because of that. So,
So do we have to go through the planning commission?
pardon?
How do we modify that?
It depends where you did it. I mean, if you could, there's a number of ways you can do it. You could do it in the zoning ordinance. West Bloomfield does it through their zoning ordinance. They have, just as I think Rochester Hills and Novi do, they say a principal use can get a liquor license if the liquor license is accessory to the principal use. That's generally the language. If you put it in the zoning ordinance, then yeah, there'd have to be planning commission approval of it. You'd have to have planning commission approval of most things anyways, because of site plan approval and perhaps special land use approval, depending on whether it's a principal permitted use or a special land use. But so yeah, there would be planning commission involved. Or you could do a separate liquor license ordinance. There's a number of ways you could go about doing it, but I think conceptually is what you have to decide. Do you want to continue down the path that we currently have, which is 6 or 7 called out uses, and those are the only uses that can get liquor licenses, or do you want to do something more broad based? That's really what the discussion should primarily be focused on.
And I did bring this to each of you to kind of go through this, figure it out, because we had been missing out on a lot because of the ordinance amendments that would be required each time someone comes to us. They have a spot they want, they've got it ready. There's no way that landlord is going to wait a year to a year and a half for us to go through the ordinance and then start the planning commission, the ZBAs, this. So the problem is that it's so restricted, we've lost out on, and we all know the pickleball thing alone, gosh, that would have saved us a lot of headaches, because these outdoor pickleballs are where we get a lot of complaints at tea times. And then I went into a deep dive with all of us of what is a convenience store, because I couldn't. First, thank you for breaking down which ones could, because the worst fear was just, no offense to that other community, but we want some some handle on it, bless you. We don't want to go where there's no oversight. That's a little too far, and that.
I was just using by way of example.
Right.
I wasn't suggesting it's a better or worse approach.
Right,
But, yeah.
but then we've gone too far this way. So in the middle is where it seems like we could find a place. And so looking up, when you helped me figure out which ones could even, like I think it was 4 that could even apply. And then I looked into like NACS is the National Association of Convenience Stores, and what is a convenience store? And our gas stations are bigger than the average convenience store, some of these. I believe it's 2,500 square feet is an average convenience store. We have a 4,000 square foot one. We have almost 3,000. So technically, they're bigger than what you would even go into. And again, this is just kind of that thought of, and then I know some people back in the day, when you think 70s, 80s, there was a stigma with people outside of liquor stores and convenience stores with their brown bags around. You don't really see that anymore. There's even wine called Mommy's Time Out. Like, there's a strange difference of what has happened over the years, but that was where we came from. Is the more I saw that poor Patti was like, gosh, this is one we could have had. You didn't know about this pickleball. It's like, oh, come on. And then with tea times, that's another example. And you have, we had a pizza location. I mean, to those that eat pizza and beer is a thing, and pizza and wine's a thing. Pizza? Yeah, we have a pizza place who has so some of these people have actual licenses that they can't use because of the restrictions. So you have a pizza place that has the SDM, was it Tormines? Whichever one Tormines had.
Well, right.
Right, so they have a license that they can't use. So now the people have to go, if they prefer to have pizza and beer or pizza and wine, they have to go to 2 spots. So again, it's about, are we serving our residents the best way possible? And again, I know people were worried, oh, what about shooters and things like that? These off-premise, I mean, frankly, if you're at a restaurant, you physically are drinking it, and we still have restaurants with liquor licenses. So that's when I started asking, like, why don't we have these larger ones? So it got to be such a broad question that I was like, we need to include the board in this. Can you do some research? I reached out to Martin and Michael about this and saying, am I looking into this too much? Would you want to look into these? I know Tea Times personally. These are great people, and the Barbets that own others, and Tormina, these are great people that we can trust, and we have trusted, and they're residents, some of them as well. So that's why I just want to bring this to everybody to say, where do we stand today Do we want, like, we're over here, Auburn Hills is way over here. Do we want somewhere in the middle? And that's why this is just an open initial discussion to figure out what you guys think.
No, I appreciate you bringing it to the board. And Derek, I appreciate, I know we've had a few discussions about this and the law and which direction we can go, and I appreciate that. Certainly, as far as I'm concerned, I think we have lost out on a lot of great opportunities. I don't want to go all the way to the other extreme.
Right.
But at the same time, there's some businesses that I think would be enhance the township and certainly be beneficial. And as the township hopefully also gets younger, I think it's great to have these things. At tea time, it's alone, and I know you've been there. It's a very exciting concept. It's a great business, and I would hate to see us lose out on a business like that because we don't have the proper ordinances carved out, which takes me back to something we talked about, Dirk. As far as even moving forward, if we are to, look at overall, changing our policy or the way we look at liquor licenses, can we at least at the same time carve out something for tea time so we can try and look at coming up with some type of statute or specific types of requirements for them so we don't lose out on them because of, like you said, Danny, you're right. The landlord's not going to wait forever for them. So
Some of these places have sat empty for a while. I mean, the location they're looking for, it's been empty since 2020. So is it better to have the empty strip malls or is it better to have good service?
And the answer is yes. If the consensus of the board tonight is that, yeah, we need to look at something broader based, that could take a number of months. So it would be appropriate to direct staff to, maybe put something together for a tea time, maybe look at the gas stations, and direct that to happen more immediately and then get to the other ones once you've taken care of those. Because if you don't take that kind of an interim approach, you're going to likely end up losing some of those. And so yeah, that's a good way to go.
Yeah, I would support going more, in the middle. We're very strict, and yet we don't want to flip too far the other way.
Yeah, so, sometimes when Bloomfield's in the majority, it's a good thing, but I think in this instance, it is something that we should consider expanding. And I think certainly we don't want to just continue to add uses because we're not going to be able to brainstorm every single business that's going to want a liquor license. So I am in favor of a more broad-based approach, and I think the way that we can make sure that Bloomfield stays Bloomfield Township is having some sort of committee, a liquor license review committee, and yeah.
Sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, so I agree. I don't want us to miss out on purposeful development. Obviously, the goal is to have the right development here in the township that not only reflect our residents, but the people that drive through our community on a daily basis, right? We have major arteries that go through our community. I want to make sure people know what they're having here in Bloomfield and what they can expect. But I also don't want to just let them do anything they want. We want to have purposeful development and make sure that we can regulate it. And if they don't meet those standards, then they don't get to have it here. So I don't want to lose out on good developers and good residents and good tenants, including the people who are already here and invest in our community.
I guess one other thing I would add, I'm not sure what the rationale was for the 4,000 square feet or the 1 acre requirement, but I would be in favor of not including those types of, unless somebody can give me a rationale for why you want it to be a certain size, I just think that that's an irrelevant criteria.
Well, part of it was acknowledging that there are constraints when you're developing a piece of property. As I threw out, you need loading zones, you need setbacks and parking setbacks, and there's trees. And so you're trying to accommodate all those requirements and at the same time then, have a development that, an investment in the development. So it wasn't necessarily looked upon that an existing, more modest retail structure would be accommodating a liquor license as opposed to someone who was making an investment of building a brand new convenience store, if you will, that was able to meet the criteria of upgrading the property. Because it was really at the time back in 2010, it was also looking at our restaurants or our gas stations were not improving their property as compared to some of our other retail or office uses. Obviously, we have several that have since then, or in the process of. So there's a little bit of that. That was thought that there'd be an investment because it certainly couldn't accommodate a 1,200 square foot building, but that maybe that 4,000 would be something that would be a significant investment, that there's going to be a quality project.
Well, the more liquor and wine and beer they can sell, the more they can invest in their property too, so.
Well, and to your point though, too, though, the older buildings, they're so small that they didn't have even the space, but when you think about all these new ones that have gone up, I didn't think I'd ever see these 3,000, 4,000 square foot ones that are going up. They're much nicer than that kind of smaller mid-century one that we had, where it was literally just get your gas and go. You can get donuts, you can get everything there now. I mean, it's just, but it's definitely, I'm thinking that maybe in 2010, they didn't know that things would progress this way. I mean, even when you think of that, we do have liquor store, people don't always know, but we do have liquor stores and wine stores in the township. Mm-hmm. So some people have said, well, we don't want that kind, well, we already have that. But these are even larger than those. I mean, these are large convenience stores that are being put up. So I'm guessing that back in 2010, you were on it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you might know that, I don't know if they even thought that gas stations would get this big.
I don't believe so, not back then, but there also was at the time, there was a pushback against having gas stations that were just there to sell liquor and get gas and then go get liquor. They're not anything like they are now as far as a convenience store, nice buildings. They have more than just, good beers and good wines. It's more of a very nice store. Back then it wasn't.
Right, yeah, they were real dingy back then.
So what's the direction that we're giving?
Yeah, so in Patty's memorandum, the last page where it says Township Board consideration, there's 3 suggestions. The first 2 are kind of the interim approach that Neil was talking about. And so it would be for the Township Board to direct staff to add indoor recreational restaurant uses with a Class C and or tavern license in the B3 district as a use that could be eligible to have a liquor license. Also to amend the automobile service station standards, to look at some standards that could be more in line of what the reality of life is right now in the township for gas stations and what they've evolved into. Those are the 2 more immediate things. And then the third portion of it is to do the broad-based rewriting of the entire liquor license portion of our ordinance, whether it's as part of the zoning ordinance or part of a separate liquor license ordinance. We can figure that all out. But that's the longer term approach. So it would be basically make a motion to follow the ABC recommendations as contained in Patty's memorandum.
And A and B would go through the planning commission?
Yes, because they would be amendment to the zoning ordinance. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so.
And C might end up too, depending on where, how.
When do we think that might come back to the board?
A and B? Well, if I'm not speaking out of turn, I know that Patty and I have been working on A already.
Yes.
And I'm sure Patty's probably, knowing Patty, already working on B too, so.
So as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, because clearly if the board's direction is to make this a priority, we will do so.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah. So just to confirm, we're going to be asking you to look at amending these things in the policy, and then we will be able to review it. So nobody will be getting the opportunity today. It would be how we're going to change those laws specifically for the gas station and convenience store, whether we're changing the square footage, the land use requirement, and or how they apply. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Because there might be some even stipulations in there of only certain hours. You have to have this specific POS system. And because I reached out to Grosse Point, because another one that back in 2010, it was the points. When you think about the Grosse Point area, they also didn't allow it. Mm-hmm. And when I heard they did, I wanted to know more about what do you do? And they have restricted hours. They have the POS system. They have a lot of protections involved as well.
Okay, perfect.
So it might even be that.
Well, and there would probably be some parking issues too, because there's going to be people that are going to not necessarily be getting gas and getting liquor, so that makes it more congested. So that would be another part of it.
That's why there's only a couple that even could That's what, when you hear 12, there's only 2
Meet the
that we
criteria.
know that could even meet the criteria that's currently accepted in other. When you think of Bloomfield, you think of high end, you think the points, like the Grosse Points, you think the Rochester Hills, you think of those. And although Birmingham's a lovely area, they're a downtown area. I don't necessarily see them the same as us. I think of it more as a residential high end area. So trying to find ways that they've reined it in where they still allow some things, but make it still not carte blanche.
And Dirk, just to clarify, and this approach also will give us the opportunity to look at some way of moving forward with a business like Tea Time.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
The tea time and the gas station would be expedited.
Okay.
Yeah, because and again, the tea times, if you haven't been there or you haven't looked it up so that you're prepared for when these things do come forward, I highly suggest going to Rochester Hills and seeing it. It's different than an X-Golf.
It's a great
It's
concept.
different. They have pros on staff that you can hire to help you with your site. I mean, it's a really different, each simulator is what, $100,000?
Yes.
So these are not quite the same of what you've seen anywhere else, so I would highly suggest taking
And
the
the other
trip.
thing, without me doing a sell job for them right now, but is that they bring in the high schools, the
Yes.
surrounding high schools with no charge.
Yes.
And they can use the simulators and give them instruction, you know, without the liquor being there at that time. And they really work with the community.
And really, where else can you go to be with your kids where they're not on their phone? This is somewhere where kids that like to golf, adults that like to golf, you can go and you can order food. It has a full menu. So it's different. Like, I believe X-Golf is more like just liquor. I don't even think they have snacks. But this is a full menu because the people who are looking to open this are actual restaurateurs who are looking to now add this into theirs. So it would be different. So I'd highly suggest before it comes back to us, have that in your field trips. Do you feel like you guys have the guidance of what you need to go forward?
Do we need a motion or is it?
It'd be nice if you made a
All right, I'll make a motion.
One quick question
Oh,
before the motion. I get the need to move quickly with regard to the indoor recreational restaurant and the proposed development. Just explain to me a little bit about why we need to move promptly with regard to the gas stations. There's not a pending development we're waiting for. It's just
They already
not
developed.
a change. Right, they're already
They
developed.
already developed and they have.
It's been a
the
long-standing rule we've had in place for a long time. I'm not saying I'm
But
opposing it.
they own
I
others
just-
that they could develop too. So it would encourage, so if somebody already has a liquor license that we wouldn't even have
They
to give
do.
up a quota license, you're kind of ensuring that why would you bother investing in your others if you can't use what you have?
Well, it has been, the rule has been set forth in this way for a long period of time with regard to
Okay.
gas stations. And I'm just not seeing, there's not a developer waiting to say, I'm gonna build a whole new place, but if I at this corner and be so beautiful, but I can't sell liquor, so I'm not gonna do it. We don't have that situation like we do at Tea Times for that one. And so maybe it's, my thought would be it's one that's fits more into the overall larger look and feel question of the township that's better suited to the longer discussion than moving ahead quickly on that one. I'm not saying I'd vote against it, but that's a reason why I think perhaps that one in particular is maybe a longer runway than the question about the indoor recreational restaurant. And by the way, I mean, I generally, I say this all the time. I mean, I don't think that we should be overly regulating uses, and the way it's been before, the township has had essentially a sign on the door that says "Don't bother to come and ask," and we no doubt have lost out on a lot of good opportunities. The gas station one isn't currently in that kind of situation.
The ones that aren't being renovated are.
Well,
They're basically
maybe,
saying, why bother?
maybe.
And but I mean, we've had, owners come and say this is something that we want, and so to me,
You're right, this is nothing new. This has been going on for years where gas station owners or convenience stores owners have been coming to you. I know they've been coming to me because I get phone calls, and so it would be nice if at least we can put something together. Maybe it doesn't have the same urgency as a tenant or a business that could lose out if we don't do something soon, but I think you can do it at the same time. I mean, you're able to do it, I know. So bring something back to us.
Yeah.
Just my eyes crossed.
I get that a lot.
On that, Clerk, the clerk's point, is making sure we have purposeful discussion on it and have the right people and constituents in the room to understand it. Because we're here to represent them, right? I want to make sure our property owners and our people that invest in our community have an ability to talk, which they came up here today. But I want to make sure that's what the feel of the township is. The tea times or some of these other purposeful ones are recreation that is kind of just missed in our ordinance. The other one was talked about. And we have an ordinance in place for gas stations or convenience stores. It just is unobtainable at this time, whether those restrictions were put on purposeful for development or to restrict liquor license is a now moot point. It's a matter of making sure our residents tell us what they want, and then we go forward with the planning and ordinance for that. So that would be the only part I want to get more in. That part I'd want to get more purposeful talk from our residents and have them be able to help us with that. That'd be the only part of that.
Well, they're going to have that opportunity because it's going to be, it'll be open to the public, certainly for the planning commission and then coming to the board. So the public will be included in all of these.
I mean, not to mention, we're allowed now. It's just restricted based on size. So it's not like we don't allow these stores to sell them.
Well, it's written in such a way that it's nearly impossible to satisfy intentionally.
Well, I don't think we can say that. I mean, we weren't on the board when that ordinance was voted in, so we don't know the rationale. Patti told us it had to do with the, height for making sure they can deliver them and they have the parking.
And even if it was done for whatever reason back then, that
We
was
can move
almost
forward
15
now.
years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so is there also going to be public hearings though, since these are ordinance amendments, there would be additional public hearings? So you have the ordinance one, you have the planning, yeah.
At least two.
Great.
Meetings.
Yeah.
At the planning commission,
public hearings.
2 meetings at the township board.
I just, people always talk about like transparent government, and we hear people come up talking about that we're not giving them an opportunity to speak. And the goal is we want to have all of the people, all the stakeholders to be able to hear this and have an opportunity to talk. We have our business owners, we have our people who invest in our community, which is great. We also want to hear the residents it affects and be able to hear all sides.
Well,
That's the point.
It was also on the agenda and we didn't have any public comment opposing. So I think I would
but
be.
people don't necessarily see the agendas.
We have a public, but it will come when we publicly notice, because you'd be noticing.
Yeah, that's great.
about that.
Yeah.
So this isn't a motion to give anybody anything tonight. This is just a motion to work on those two, and let's talk broader because we want to be ready for the next one that comes.
And I support that. I do. I was just making a point about ICB is in a different category than A here. That's all. But I do support the idea. Let's talk about it more.
Do we have anybody who's ready to make a motion?
I was ready to make a motion to give direction to the planning staff to begin the process of amending the ordinances in A and B, and also to set up a process for C, rewriting the manner in which we, as a township, allow liquor sales.
Support.
By Treasurer Shostak, support by Trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That does pass.
All right, thank you.
so much.
Thank you, Patty.
So next we have considering approval of the 2024-25 water and sewer rate discussions presented by Director Noah Mehalski.
Thank you.
All right, good night. I think that's the first time I've said that, but I don't think I can say good evening anymore. Couple things before I get started. I wanted to touch on the MEU discussion that we've heard, and one thing is the MEU structure we didn't go from a completely variable rate to a structure that utilized the MEU. We actually went from a residential equivalent unit, which was kind of discussed by a resident tonight, which looked at the fixtures in the buildings and determined the usage based on that before. So we went from that to proportionalize our rates where we treated all the residents the same, basically. Then it was brought up by public comment that that was not equitable, and so we looked for a way to proportionalize those rates. One of the recommended methodologies to do that is using the meter size coming into the building as that methodology. So then that's why we put that in place. But it's important that we did not come from a state where we had a completely variable rate and go to that. We've had a fixed fee component as part of the rate for some time now. Additionally, that MEU structure is not used to proportionalize the variable rate portion. It's to proportionalize the fixed fees, which remain constant within the system. So that's important to realize. Additionally, our minimum service line in the township is an inch service. That's very unique, right? And that's germane to our high use, right? Our components within that fixed fee, roughly 20% of O&M, township O&M costs, that's my costs, and then our debt costs that we've accrued. These fees are not variable, right? We have to pay our debts, and I can't hire and fire employees based on the number of water main breaks or things like that, right? We have to be prepared at a level to maintain the system. It's utilized across the industry, in addition to over 50% of the Metro Detroit communities. Our data proves out the ratios being supplied by the AWWA. What do I mean by that? When we look at the average usage per meter size, they go up from our 5/8 meter all the way up to our 6-inch meter. You have average usage per quarter increasing, and that's what you're liable to see based on the demand posed on the system. That tells me that the MEU rate structure and the ratios in place there are reflective of our residents' usage, okay? Particularly in the 1.5-inch category, because there's been some discussion about that, right? So they're a contingent of about 900 households, right, or customers within the township. It's very unique, the makeup of that group. In other communities, that is a 100% commercial group. In the township, it's a very much weighted to residential use. So we are abnormal and unique in that category as well. And that also, you know, I looked at the rate when we were developing it, and I looked at, could we couch costs in commercial? And like we've talked about before, from a rate structure overall, we don't really have that commercial base to couch that cost in. That is particularly true within the 1.5-inch service line people or meter people. They are predominantly residential customers, and they use average. They use a higher amount than the 1-inch people below them, and they use a lesser amount than the 2-inch people above them on average, right, as a cohort. Irrigation, as I pointed out, uniquely, irrigation is 40% of our usage, so that is reflected within our MEU numbers and the average usage per meter size, right? So that reflects that hunger for irrigation water within Bloomfield Township. And again, all classes kind of lined up how we expected in their average usage, whereas if you were a 1-inch meter, you have a lower average usage than someone with a 6-inch meter. And that's what that ratio tries to get at, right? And we have to remember too, this is an approach from a fixed fee that was flat for all of our residential customers to a more equitable rate to split those fees based on some sort of factor, and that was usage. Before we went to this, everyone paid the same on a residential level, and the residents told us that was not equitable. So this was a first attempt to get towards that equitability. Additionally, a key factor for me is that there's relief available. One thing, I had 50 or 60 people call me and discuss changing their meter out, right? And they can do that. And fortunately, we're part of a meter program right now. We can mitigate some of those costs if somebody wants to replace a meter, because we were going to replace it anyway, right? What we can't do and what I can't do is tell people if it's okay plumbing wise to reduce that meter size. I'm not an engineer. I did not build the home. I don't know what the requirements of the home were, but I trust engineers, and typically they size the pipes for what the home needs, right? And so that, if that's not the case, again, I want a plumber to tell the resident that, so they don't have, let's say, a second floor bathroom not function properly from like a shower that's got a lot of shower heads or something. They don't get the pressure at the third level, or their irrigation system used to function where they had 3 or 4 zones going at once, and now they don't have that ability, right? So a plumber has to come in and look at the plumbing in the home. I can't tell them because that's all unique. But there is relief from the fee available if people can kind of determine that that's safe for their home. So, there's been talk about a fully burdened rate, right? And I want to talk about the risk involved with that. Many of our costs are fixed within the system. And I've said this before, 100% of our sewer, all the township O&M, again, I can't lay off employees and hire them and, do those things. We have to be ready at all times to support the system. I have to have a Vector truck in the garage, right? Or else I don't have one when we have a sewer backup, right? So additionally, we have regulatory requirements that are not tied to usage whatsoever. We have to do chemical testing on the water. We have to follow state guidelines regardless of if we sell a drop of water or not. We can't budget a deficit in the water department. If we don't have the reserve balance, we can't plan to run basically bankrupt, right? And I don't think you guys as a board would want us to run the system that way. But that's just, we can't run it at a deficit statutorily. So uniquely, that's all these things, these unique factors make it a data heavy type of process to maneuver with the rates or change the rate structure. So we went to our best case as far as the 1.5 or the MEU structure. We'll look at in the future changing that, but we can't do that before we have that data. And really the data is proving out that the MEU structure, there may be outliers, but the MEU structure has accomplished what we set out to do based on the data in the system. So, and then there would be a philosophical question of, okay, if you move the 1.5ers down on the pay scale, does everybody on the lower end pay for that, or does everybody on the upper end pay for that, right? Because it's a pie, and how we cut the pie is the difference. We still have the pie to eat, right? So if someone's paying less, someone else has to pay more. So pragmatically, I kind of ask that question when someone doesn't like the fee for the 1.5 inch meters, and they can't give me a real good answer on should we, kind of impress those fees upon the lower group or on the higher group, but that will be a discussion that has to take place if we want to do that, right? So also I've heard basing it on population. Well, is that during Christmas with everybody at the house? Is that before the kid goes back? Like, we can't manage how many occupants are actually inside the home at a given time. How that's monitored is through the meter usage on the actual meter, right? So those type of solutions really are burdened. I don't understand how you would manage the type of occupants, right? We've even heard about water budgeting, right? You tell me how much water you need for the next quarter. When you get to that amount, you're gonna pay double, or we're gonna shut you off, right? But that's probably not where we want to go either, right? But that's displaying the uniqueness of these rates, the homegrown nature, right? And where we're trying to go with that MEU. And I believe we've accomplished that. Ooh. All right, so then recapping a little bit on the budget. We've got our projected usage. There's been some discussion about this. It's based actually on a 5-year trend. SACWA uses a 3-year trend, but we like to look at an extra couple of years because that gives you a more full picture. And what you end up, it's a declining trend overall. So a linear regression, and it's highly weather dependent. So what you end up seeing in a given year is depending on weather, is we're either off high or low on our estimate, right? And it's a wet year, we're gonna be low on our estimate here because nobody's irrigating outside, right? Whereas if it's a dry year, we will likely be low on our estimate there, but we have to use the linear regression over the long term to capture the declining trend in the industry and also capture our real fluctuations in the weather, right? If you look at the graph, the rates are wild like that, and the linear regression is like that, right? Our residents have told us we don't want our rates artificially low this year and then raise the rates in the next year to make up for that deficiency. So we look for that linear regression in the middle. And that does indicate a downward trend in usage. So then you talk about why are we looking to increase the rates, right? We've had some internal increases. Staffing, we finally brought staffing up in the water department back to what it was 7 or 8 years ago. So we've replaced staff that moved out, moved on, moved up. Sewer maintenance, we had the SAW grant, and when you look for problems in the sewer, you find problems in the sewer, and so that's increased our capital expenditures. Capital improvement, a major component. Again, when you're looking for problems, you're finding problems, And so we've had some major capital work that has occurred, some of it unplanned. And we've struggled to spend that capital money based on market forces, such as supply and demand of materials and, human capital, brain power, that type of stuff. Projected drawdown of the reserves. So this year we are, just like last year, we're trying to draw down on the reserves because we have a goal for our reserve level. We're above it right now, and so we will spend down to that level. Whether we'll be able to do it or over collect largely depends on the weather at this point and whether we can get the projects in the ground, right? And when I talk about those projects, 4 or 5 capital projects that I mentioned last time, Forest Lake, Club Drive, Lakewood, those water main, Verner's Estates, those water main projects, then our meter program as well in there. So, additionally, you'll notice our fee increases are higher from our suppliers than what we're proposing to you tonight. We've mitigated those raises and fees with reserve money, okay? So then again, our external sources, this is 60% of our budget, right? So I only got 40% to achieve that mitigation, right? I can't achieve any savings for 60% of my operation because we're receiving those increases, right? So the things I control, I'm very limited in what I can do. But what are the factors there, right? 4.5% on sewer, water 3%. They're doing increased drain maintenance from WRC, and that, the more they look, the more they're gonna find, so we're preparing for that. Additionally, costs to procure and produce water always go up. So that's exactly what you see there, right? So chlorine, pumps, pipes, material, all that is reflective of the climate that we're in. I'm surprised, just based on market factors, that the water fee isn't increasing more, because what have we been seeing for inflation out there? So in a nutshell, that's kind of why we arrive at these sewer rates. I will touch on the error that was propagated that you guys caught the last time. So what happened there was we utilize our minimum service size, which is 1 inch, to calculate our sewer flat fee, because if they called and asked to put a meter in, our ordinance dictates it's 1 inch. 3/4 inch fee was used to calculate that flat rate under the last that you saw. Basically, they used the wrong MEU factor within that sewer flat fee. So I've corrected that. And I have in your packet, there are the 2 resolutions, which will allow us to, and again, overall, we've mitigated the raise in water down to 2%, and we've mitigated the raise in sewer down to 4%. We couldn't mitigate, like sewer took a little bit bigger hit because our capital projects are kind of weighted towards sewer at this point. So, and we have a $3 million that's rate funded CIP. So this, that we're dipping into the reserves is above and beyond that. So it's a big year as far as CIP work. So my proposal would be to have a proposal from you guys a motion from you guys to accept the resolutions as printed and as in the packet, and then we will administer that to produce water bills, because we're already 8 days into the new, where these rates are effective.
And then, we'll need 2 motions. Is there any questions or anything?
I have a quick question. No, I'm sorry, I didn't catch this earlier. In the water motion, the 5/8 inch and 3/4 inch, shouldn't that be the same number?
Yep.
The one in the packet has a penny more for the quarter.
Oh, yeah, that's a rounding thing. It's over I saw that within the original report, so that's a rounding thing. I should have called him before I came here. I don't know how to deal with that. You know what, I would say let's make them even, and I'll call him, and then them fractions of penny aren't gonna matter.
So when you say make them even,
Contingent upon, approve the resolution contingent upon the 5/8 and 3/4 inch meters being the same.
At 21 cents or 22 cents, because it is very contentious and a penny matters.
21 cents at the lower amount. The rounding was to make up for the.
Okay, perfect, because it
round
matters.
it down.
Rounding down.
It matters.
Yep. I mean, that would take away that revenue. So that will cut into the reserves even more, which is a good thing.
I was curious, it came up in public comment and I was wondering, if we purchase more water than we end up using, what happens?
Well, if we sell more and then we generate more than we expected in the rate. So I think that's what that comment was getting at, right? And that's largely driven by weather. So from a director's standpoint, we have to be conservative and we have to ride the middle, right? But that creates a situation where actual usage, if it's a really hot year, actual usage will be higher than the linear regression line. So we will over collect in those years. That's why it's important. That will go to reserves. We have our goals in reserves and we will spend that money back out. What you may see in other communities, Royal Oak is one of them where I see this, where if you try to mitigate that with your rate, you're going to have a super increase one year and you're going to have a super decrease the next year. And that's not, I would rather ride that linear regression line. And that kind of cuts the middle, right? So the winning and losing should be evened out by that just by the pure definition of that regression line.
Sure, and taking into consideration the age of our system, I don't think that we can collect too much, frankly, because when these emergencies come up, these are multi-million-dollar projects, and we have to make sure that we have the money for them. The only other thing I'll add, because I know that we already discussed this before, and I just want to again give you all the kudos, you and your department, and everything that you do. But for me, I'm not going to be able to approve the rate because I do not agree with the meter equivalent standard. And just one other thing that I will add is, because we were sued, it obviously wasn't popular to say, let's keep the rate as we had originally been charging residents. But after everything that I've learned, I'll give, a lot of credit to Wayne Dominy, because he clearly was an expert in what he did, and I know that you were under his tutelage, and I feel grateful that we have you, and I'm sure that you took a lot of that expertise by training and working under him. So I do think that that standard, while it was challenged, ultimately I think resulted in a fairer rate. And the only other thing I'll add, we are working more towards usage-based, but we will never, or I guess I should say, I wouldn't suggest that we're ever fully variable, because as you've mentioned time and time again, we have fixed costs. Those costs will never go away, and we will need to make sure that we have money to run the system as residents expect.
Yep, that's when we had this discussion, Martin and I, that today, you're taking on risk in a category where you all have variable rates, and you're taking on literally risk for weather, right? And if you take on all, the fixed fee is a mitigation of risk, right? And so how do you mitigate that risk? If you've got no fixed fee, you probably have a higher variable rate in the end to cover yourself, right? Because we won't put no matter what rate structure we have and which way that goes out, we will not put the system in jeopardy. So, that's the key tenet.
Can I just correct one thing? You mentioned over collect. We don't over collect. We collect the proper amount. We're just over budget.
Correct, and/or the weather.
Just like you could
the
be
weather
under
impacts
Not over collecting.
the amount. No.
My department is not harassing
If
people.
we
and over collecting.
No.
Okay.
If residents use more water than we project,
Right. So we
then
are
we
over
may-
budget in
right.
our revenue.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
again, the
Whether
factor
yours
at play
would
there
be
would be
under
the
budget.
weather.
Understood. Yeah. If it's over or under budget, it's not over or under collect.
Correct. Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions for Noah?
It's just one, it's kind of going back to the last meeting. We talked about when you'll have enough data from the meters so we can look at this intelligently and with enough data to make decisions as far as changing the approach and calculating the water and sewer rates that may be more equitable, because we talk about equity. That was a concern a couple of years ago when we changed things, and it's not totally equitable now for other people. I mean, you're right, it's a balance and it swings back and forth, but I don't know, there's some people who are paying more than they should, or at least they feel that way because their pipe size is, of such that they get charged more even if they don't use the water. So with that said, as much water. With that said though, I think it's very important that we move, like I said last time, as quickly as possible to have the data so that we can revisit this and reevaluate how we're charging these rates, because I'm not comfortable with saying, okay, in 3 years, we'll look at it again. I would like to be able to look at it next year, to tell you the truth. I've been thinking about this the last couple of weeks, and 2 years, 3 years, it's just not enough. And I think we need the data, whatever data we have, so that we can look at this next year and reevaluate what we're doing and how we're charging the residents.
And we are having them look at what would happen if you're talking about, so you're looking at outliers at that point and manipulating or changing the makeup of the MEU structure to fit that, right? And so I'm looking at currently, if we move those similar to the 3/4, if we move the 1.5 down to the 1 inch category, again, then the question is, who do we charge those charges back to? The higher usage or that lower cadre, right? And that's a fair question. But so that's what I'm having them look at right now. The impact of something like that is much less, and so the data required to look at that is much less as well, right? And so I'm being told that due to our unique circumstances here, that makes the our sample size needs to be very high because it's unpredictable, and so that's what I'm reacting to, on that end. But I think we can tweak things. That was kind of a thought I had for this year to next year. Because that would I've not heard from any other group, and we are very unique here. I mean, what's our biggest residential that's just being built right now? Is that a 6 inch? 6 inch. I mean, no community has a 6 inch water service. Nobody.
Yeah.
So, if you start to look at outliers, are the outliers made by us or are they made by human activity as well?
So to Neil and Martin's point though, since we all want to get to that usage base, so that somebody with a smaller meter but who's using more water technically pays their share versus somebody who lives in a 6,000 square foot home but doesn't use as much water as when the professional basketball player lived there. So getting there, when do you think you would actually have the meters converted over? Because even if we have data, how would you charge appropriately for those that don't have the meters yet?
We can't collect the data until we get the meters in there. So that's really the factor that's key. And that's why I've been coming and taking money out of reserves to support that.
Do we have an
program.
Estimated
they're
time
telling,
of when you think
again, they're saying it was 2-3 years out from now.
From now.
Yeah, because we need, we literally we were ramping up last year, right? And we could, then do you start?
Because weren't they supposed to be 2 to 3 years, or 3 years from when we?
2 years ago.
Right, but we didn't even get meters in because Badger couldn't produce them, right? So that's the market forces that we're working with, right? And then we have stepped up notifications, trying to get into homes. That's the next step, right? And so the 3 letters, the calls, the staking in the front yard, that is producing the uptick. And we get it. We are going to be aggressive to get to this end. That's why we're being aggressive, right? So we're pushing that. We're doing everything we can to get that data in there, but that risk you run, and I guess I can start to determine with him what's the level of risk we're okay with taking on.
Right.
What that risk will result in is a higher rate, probably, because we have to be covered.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't want to get to a point where we have the rates so bloated because of the risk and the kind of impotence to do it faster.
Well, and I know Jason Tice wouldn't appreciate me saying this, but wouldn't it be that if we did take a risk and we weren't right because we don't have enough data, we have the reserves to make up for it?
Well, after this year, we'll be down to we would be cutting into emergency reserves.
But I mean, if you're waiting 2 years and you have almost all the data, you're less likely versus switching today.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to determine
So
with the consultant how much risk is involved with that.
Yeah.
Because he just, my thing was, hey, do we need to have 50% of meters? And he said, no, you need to have more like 90%. So that was my first attempt.
Who was giving us
that? Was Raftelis for data accurate, statistically relevant information. And again, that's where if you set those tiers wrong, you have risk on the system. So, and whether that
Do other
means,
communities use this type of system, and is that why he has such a high threshold for the sample size? Because when you say 90%,
the nature of our usage being
so because
highly,
we're such an outlier, he needs a higher sample size because we don't fit into the conforms of
because
normal
of our
communities.
non-commercial usage that's highly variable, because of our irrigation usage, which again is very dependent on the weather, literally, those are the key factors that drive that high sample size necessary.
And again, the way we're pricing stuff now is the stopgap until we have that information so that we can do the more equitable and what our community is asking for. But we don't have the tools currently to be able to do that. That's why we come up with this
I hear it
solution.
loud and clear, and I have been pushing him. It's just literally like we have go look in our shop right now how many meters we got in there. We got $3 million in inventory in there. We're not buying that to sit it
So
there.
is there another, let's consider, so we did go to them thinking they could do it in 3 years. Was there a backup person that also came in close that we could actually consider having two running this concurrently to get it out there faster? Like two companies
Another meter.
installing.
Well, see, I guess we'd have to cut into reserves more. We're gonna spend the money this year now that we're geared up and I'm comfortable with that. But it was these outside forces that kind of created the paradigm from last year, both in the meter program those forces are everywhere out there.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I think there may be some confusion up here that we're not planning to go away from a fixed component.
Much
right?
lower though of a fixed.
Okay, but there still will be a fixed component.
I
And
agree.
how
There
we
should
allocate
be.
the fixed component will be either the MEU methodology or some other methodology, but we still have to allocate the fixed costs that we need for the system to ensure stability, which is an important part. So, yes, having more data from a broader base of customers will have a sense of how we can tier the rates in a more fair way for the variable component, but there's still going to be a fixed component. And how we allocate that fixed component.
And that is up to you
It's either going to
guys.
continue to be the MEU methodology, or it's going to be something else.
Right, it could be MEU
We
modified.
could go back to the fixed system.
We could have everybody pay the same, like it was before. And if you're gone for, if you got a 5/8 inch meter and you don't use, 1,000 gallons of water, you're paying the same fixed fee as someone who has a 6-inch meter and uses millions and millions of gallons of water.
When you
Yeah,
do
but that's
that,
for
though,
the
that
tier.
is a little more fair. So when it was done before, it wasn't fair or equitable because you didn't even have data for who are the high users. But if you do have the data and you can figure out high users and set tiers, then having the older fixed rate model of everybody pays the same, since it's just slow, it'll be a much smaller amount that we're trying to collect on fixed.
That's up to you. I would always recommend that a component of our rate is a fixed fee variable for all those reasons I said. Our sewer costs are 100% fixed. Our O&M costs, 100% fixed. Regulations don't go away depending on how much water you use. So all those fixed costs, in my mind, breed some sort of fixed fee component. What that percentage, we argued between 23 and 21% of O&M costs and all that. Those are risk factors, and the board was adverse of going back even 2% in the amount that they supported the fixed fee. So the past has not borne that out either. You have to be real careful because you take on more risk if you don't have those fixed fees, and your risk is based on weather.
And the great news is that this is not something that needs to be decided tonight.
Right, and the even better news is we're working towards this. We're doing it as fast as possible. There's no incentive to wait.
If nothing else, you're getting a lot of direction from the board.
And it's not like I haven't heard it, right? So I want to assure you, we are working towards this. We clearly have heard it for 3 years now, right? We have heard this. There's no reason for me to hold back on it versus knowing if we're comfortable to make the move, right? And that discussion is a big one because we could look at any number of different, like the water budgeting. That's a true way to set a rate. Like, you tell me how much you want, and after you're done with that, you're either getting a penalty or you're not getting any more water.
Well, that sounds low.
It's not the way I would operate, but that is a way you can.
Sounds pretty harsh to me.
Well, it's almost like the one in Lansing that I always reference, that they play a flat fee, regardless of what you use. But that's a way that you can do it. It's statutorily available to you.
I would make that as our example.
Well, it's an example because it's a really bad one.
It's
and it's on the wide
Not
end.
because it's from Lansing.
Certainly is
Lansing.
bad.
Well, and it shows the discretion, right, that the board has to
And
do
that
that.
homegrown rates, right, where rates are truly, how much do you care about, how much, I mean, literally, do residents care if they get 10 or 11 more service interruptions throughout a year? Yes, I believe they do, right? And that is not the type of water department I want to represent. So that's all comes out of that too, right?
Well, 100% on that angle. I mean, certainly for me, and I think everyone here, maintaining the system at a very high level of reliability is something that the board has historically put money toward, and we're doing it again, and that's critical. It's a large part of the cost too.
Yep, we probably had 0%.
And we could save money by doing
investing in our system.
Yeah, by doing no maintenance, we'd save money today, but we'd just be kicking that can down the road.
Probably O&M costs would go up on a progression,
And later, when we're not here, someone else will have to pay for it.
But
which
it's
that's wrong.
interesting
I don't want to do
what
that.
other municipalities do, like where you turn on the tap at somebody else's house in a different part of the state or the country. I've noticed water pressure is really low. You know, like we always have good water pressure too, and we have quality water. And
That is not questioned here.
Yeah, no doubt. We have the best people running our system, and my no vote it has nothing to, no, it's obviously nothing against you. And like I said before, I would not want anybody else running my system as somebody who drinks, straight from the tap. But I know we're following Raftelis, and the board wants to keep doing that. So I just want to thank you.
So do we have anybody who's ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for the water service charges that, rather than reading the entire
As
thing.
presented.
Right, and there's two, one
Right,
for water.
the water, and there's one for sewer. I know the water one with the correction that the 3/4 will be $31.21.
Right.
So that's the first one.
So we have a motion for the water.
Support.
By trustee Burnett, support by clerk Brook. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Do you want to do roll call or you?
Oh. Well, we have one opposed, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Trustee Faki is opposed. Otherwise, we are all yes.
That does pass 6-1.
And then to make a motion that we pass a resolution for the sewer service charges as presented by Noah.
Motion by trustee Burnett,
Support.
support by trustee Murray. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Anyone opposed?
For the sewer, I think I'm okay. So,
Okay.
yeah, I agree.
Does pass 7-0 then.
I think.
All right, great. So
Good
that
enough.
does pass. Thank you, Noah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Next, we have discussed the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, DNR, local watercraft control findings and resolutions concerning 10 lakes within the township. We have Clerk Brook.
Yeah. So I found a PowerPoint template that looks like water. And here we are to talk about more water and the ongoing project that Bloomfield Township was engaged in collaboration with our community to adopt enforceable local watercraft controls. And based upon the board's adopted proposals to the DNR, our goal has been to preserve what we in short call the no motorboat lakes and add a regulation to prohibit high-powered electric motors and implement also a slow no-wake ordinance. Now each lake was not exactly the same, but that's a good summary of generally what we were looking at to do to preserve the way it was with regard to no motorboats, and to by adopting with the DNR an enforceable regulation, and then prohibit the high-powered electric motors because the technology is changing to allow that to happen, and keep our lakes safe with the slow no-wake speeds. So where have we been so far? In 1970 roughly, I don't know the month, but 1970, the township adopted ordinances without obtaining DNR approval, and the ordinances were for electric motor only local watercraft controls. Those ordinances have been adhered to because that's the desire of the local residents. The ordinances, as the DNR has pointed out to us, very stringently in the last few months that those ordinances are not enforceable. And that is one of the driving forces behind the township's efforts and the efforts of our community members to go through this process to obtain an enforceable, approved, DNR approved local watercraft control. So in 2021, residents of the lakes did come to us specifically also about the high-speed electric motors, because the way that the ordinances were drafted, it allowed electric motors without any kind of limitation. The Board of Trustees adopted an ordinance, proposed ordinance, and requested the DNR to approve a local watercraft control to implement the no ICE, it's internal combustion engines, and limited size electric and slow no wake, which was submitted to the DNR on July 13th, 2022. In the spring of 23, the DNR held some in-person meetings here in Township Hall, and many residents appeared to discuss and answer questions. Then the DNR provided initial investigative reports on September 27th, 23, which really strongly implied that the DNR did not support or find any support for any local watercraft controls at all. As required by statute, the DNR then convened local public hearings on the proposed local watercraft controls, and we discussed through a lot of participation from a large number of folks at these public hearings. There were more than 175 residents attended those hearings. Also attending those hearings and speaking were our local elected legislators, our local elected county representatives, and our sheriff submitted comments in support of the township. All of them supported the township in its efforts to obtain the local watercraft controls that we were seeking. As a result, the DNR did make...
We did also have state officials. We had state senators and state...
Oh, yes, that was my legislators, I said. But yeah, our state, which
Just
includes senators
there was a question
and...
today earlier if the state
Yes.
was behind us, and
Our
we
state
did have
legislators,
state-
including elected representatives and senator who represents us, of both parties, were here. There was an unknown number, but many dozens of additional written comments were submitted to the DNR. And I think we got a long way with them. We did ultimately get from the DNR a decision on March 28, 2024, which found a basis for local watercraft controls and found that the local watercraft control that the DNR would approve is to implement a slow, no wake ordinance. According to the rules, all we can do at this point is adopt that or reject it or potentially appeal it. And there's a slide here later that says legal advice. That's where Dirk is going to come in. As I indicated, we've really had a very strong, uniform voice from all the lakes, strongly supporting to maintain a no motorboat environment, and to expand it into controlling high-powered electric motors so that we can maintain safe, quiet enjoyment of the lakes, which is critical to the folks that live on the lakes and have lake access. It was just really uniform. When at these meetings, Danny attended all of them, I was at all of them, I think Val was at all of them, others were at some of them too. I think, Treasurer Shostak, I was at all of them. It was really great to see the residents all pulling together to try to move in one direction. And more than one time, the DNR officer would say, well, we can't make everybody happy. And wrong. This is the one time they can make everybody happy. Everybody wants to continue with a no internal combustion engine rule and preserve the quiet enjoyment and safe enjoyment of these lakes. Despite that, they didn't go ahead and do that. But we did submit also written public comment. We, being the township board, gave me authority to submit written comments, which strongly pointed out the fact that there are many other Oakland County lakes that have a no motorboat type rule. We would not be blazing any ground territory here that's different than what they've done with others. And including the last decade, Green Lake and West Bloomfield was allowed to have a no motorboat rule. Interestingly, though, I have to say that they Green Lake first petitioned the DNR for such a rule and was denied. They found there was no condition requiring local watercraft controls. They applied again the next year, and the DNR found that there was conditions that warranted local watercraft controls and implemented a no motorboat rule. As indicated, we've received a great number of additional support from our elected officials, and unnoted additional emails that were sent out, and we have a uniform voice here. Our next slide. So, the DNR, it has said this, and we are bound by what the DNR has indicated. We can reject it, appeal it, or adopt it as specifically as is. This is the one I copied from Wing Lake, but I took out Wing Lake and put an insert lake and location. They were all the same. Slow, no wake speed means a very slow speed whereby the wake or wash created by the vessel would be minimal. That's going to be what's in the in the ordinance if the board chose to go that way and adopt it. Now we also have to, by the way, continue on. We have to put up signs, and in order for it to be an enforceable ordinance. And there are launch sites on the lakes where those signs would be required. There's, I think, potentially where Upper Long Lake and Lower Long Lake connect, a sign or buoy with a sign would be required, because Upper Long Lake is a motorboat lake, and these boats would be allowed to enter into Lower Long Lake now, and the sign there would remind them of the requirement that it's a slow, no wake lake. Next slide. So we've got some options here at this point. I want to highlight, and many of those emails I have shared with the board, not every single one of them, but the emails are coming in from the individuals that were involved. And I sent out notice via email when the decision was shared with us, or shortly after, letting the lake residents know what the DNR's position was. A couple of the lakes have been pretty silent about it. They're very small, lakes, but many other lakes are happy that we've gotten what we've gotten so far. Recognize that it was a heavy lift to get this far from the DNR, but really do want to go the next step and are unhappy with the loss of the no motorboat rule. And again, it's not exactly a loss. I mean, we all believed it was a rule, but it was not an enforceable ordinance here in the township. So I've written down a few options. There's probably many more. These are just here as a starting point for discussion purposes, to put something up we can all look at. We can adopt the ordinances as provided to us, which is on the adoption point, our only option. We cannot amend it or add to it in any way, shape, or form. It's just adopt it the way it is. We could appeal this finding of conditions supporting local watercraft controls. Maybe. That's the next bullet at the bottom, legal advice. We could adopt an appeal, maybe. We could definitely reject it and say we simply do not agree with this, and try again next year. Certainly within our power to do. We could then, adopt it and file a new petition in the future years, perhaps seeking a no motorboat rule at that time, based on observed conditions that we see over the next year or two within the lakes. There are local options too, that the HOAs on most of these lakes own all of the launch sites. Some of the HOAs have restrictive covenants that prohibit motorboats. And as the owner of these lake access parcels, the HOAs have the power to adopt rules, for instance, saying can't launch a motorboat. So we want to just make sure that, and whatever other ideas people can come up with that are out there that for us to think about. Today's is a discussion. We're not, asking for any particular action. but a sense from the board of which direction to go. And before talking about that a little more, maybe let's hit the legal advice bullet.
So first of all, let me say that I don't agree entirely with the DNR's decision. I just want to make that clear so everyone understands that. But having said that, I would not recommend appealing, and I'll tell you why. First of all, the DNR's decision was addressed the primary issue, which was safety. And safety is one of the issues that the DNR's got the ability to regulate and make a decision based on. Noise is an aesthetic, and generally the DNR has made it clear they generally will not regulate or come up with a special rule which is based on aesthetics. So really, to a great extent, this is a victory for the township. If you were to adopt the ordinance, the township is, and the lakes that we were dealing with are far better off than they are today, because you've eliminated the safety issue by the slow no wake portion of it that currently doesn't exist today. With respect to appealing it, there's three major reasons why I think appealing it is a bad idea. And I do, before I say that, I will also say that I think it's really important that no matter what you decide with respect to appealing it, whether to appeal or not to appeal, you need to adopt that ordinance, because you at least have to get the slow no wake provision adopted and enforceable for this coming summer. Because if you don't adopt it, you simply appeal it, it could be a year before any decision is made. And so in the meantime, you would not have the slow no wake. But the reason I'm recommending not to appeal it is, there's, again, three reasons. The statute that regulates the appeal is MCL 324.80110 parent 6. And what it basically says is a determination by the DNR under this section that a special rule is not needed may be appealed to the director of the DNR by the political subdivision, that's us. In the instant case, the DNR did not rule that a special rule is not needed. They ruled that, in fact, decided that a special rule is needed. It's just not the entire special rule that we asked for. So the first question is does that statute, in the way it's worded, even give you the authority to appeal? A strong argument could be made that because they didn't decide that a special rule is not needed, that you don't even have the right to appeal in the first place. So that's one consideration. Second consideration is if you do appeal, the appeal is going to be de novo, which means they can look at everything. And theoretically, maybe it's not likely, but theoretically, they could say, well, you know what? No, we're not going to agree to even allow you to have this slow no wake. They're going to take that back. And then the third part of the appeal, and it's really to me the one that is maybe the most telling and influences my opinion the most, is the appeals to the director of the DNR. So you are basically appealing to the body's the body's director of the body that's already told you they don't think you need a special rule. So to me, it's a pretty futile attempt. I mean, if it was an independent body you were appealing to, a court, an arbitrator, some independent body, I guess I would say, well, yeah, you've got nothing really to lose. But if you're appealing it to the director of the department that's already told you no, I think that's futile. So when you take all three of those things into consideration, also take into consideration the fact that you have achieved a major victory in protecting the safety of those lakes, I just question whether it's number one, I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to achieve the result you want. I think it's going to be basically a futile exercise. And certainly we would advocate it and prosecute it to the fullest extent that we can, but I think that we're kind of kidding ourselves if we think really we're likely to see a different result. And is that the best way to spend taxpayers' money, appealing to the director of the department that has denied you? I just really question that, if you even have an appeal in the first place, because again, the DNR did not say a special rule is not needed. They said a special rule is needed, so it doesn't even comply with the express terms of the statute itself. If you decide to appeal, I think it's really important that for all those that are maybe watching this meeting at home, to not have false hope, to understand that the likelihood of prevailing on an appeal is very, very small, in my legal opinion. There may be other reasons why it's worthwhile doing it that aren't legal in nature, but my legal opinion, simply that, is that you've achieved a victory, and there are some risks inherent with appealing it, as well as a small likelihood of prevailing. So, having said that, I will keep my mouth shut.
So I really appreciate what, I don't have a question really, well, I do have one question, part of it. I appreciate what Dirk just said, and, you know, having spent 2 whole nights here and being a lake person myself, I took this very seriously. And one of the things I told them was, it isn't a one size fits all. And that goes for all the lakes. You know, they were all different sizes, so I kind of reject their treating every one of these lakes the same. However, in reading Martin's packet, I thought it was very, very clear, and I totally agree with Dirk that it sounds like our best option is we did get a victory, and yes, I was disappointed in some of what we got, but we got it. It's across all the lakes, none were at least excluded, that we adopt it, because the appeal does sound risky, because I read every minute of that plus Dirk's explanation. But my only question is, so I believe we should adopt it, but can we, in the future, ask, like, take this, because this is a victory and we don't want to risk losing it. We don't want to, like you said, go another summer without the rule in place. Take this and then, in addition, follow up with a consideration for, a consideration to add, not to change and take
But
this
another
away.
way, could you do a new request a year from now
Like
or
the way
whatever?
Green Lake did.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
And ask for the no motorboat. And, the DNR, I mean, what the DNR stands for is, you would think things like prohibiting, gas engines, that's a huge thing of protecting our lakes and our environment. It's such an important thing. Plus, I mean, how many residents we had? Hundreds of residents, and there was only one person the entire night.
Of all the lakes.
Of all the lakes, and 2 nights worth of meetings, there was only one person that wanted to keep his boat, and everybody else was pleading. They were emotional, they were thoughtful, they were considerate, they were calm. It was one of the most unanimous things I've seen, and it was for good reason. And I think to protect the lakes, to try and add the no motorboat, I would definitely be in favor of trying to add that to this, but accept this for now.
So I'll just say, there was a public comment that seemed to suggest that motorboats were going to be allowed, or that was something that the board, didn't have an opinion on. And I think the discussion tonight makes clear that the board has a strong opinion, and it's in line with what the residents want. And while it's not the no motorboat that we would have hoped for, this is certainly progress in the right direction, and we should adopt the recommendation.
Some questions or comments? I have a couple questions. So if we were to, do we have to accept all as is, or an appeal all as is, or can we, you said some are silent, or they kind of are happy, can we put those aside and discuss others? First of all, is that even an option of just appealing or going forward with others?
As I understand it, and Dirk will surely ring in, I mean, they have made 10 separate determinations, and we can do 10 different responses.
Okay.
It's within our
good question
decision.
And then next,
I agree.
okay, and then the next question is, knowing that the director has a conflict of interest with somebody at Bloomfield Township, ex-college or roommate, or
I know the director of the DNR.
he will not be probably able to do it because it's a conflict of interest. Do we know who would hear? Well, that's a direct conflict if his ex-roommate is, like, I'm more worried
see it
of
as a
who would sit
conflict.
in
We don't
his
have any
spot.
financial interests, I'm not in business with him. We don't, I know him. I know the governor.
Well, no, but weren't you roommates with him? Yeah. So I'm just
Oh,
worried,
wow.
what if he steps down? Who would then be, just in case, who is the backup?
Statute says it's the director.
It says director,
So he has to hear it.
that's the way I read it.
In which case it'd be
And
great,
I don't know
'cause
the
he's your
fact that,
ex-roommate.
that Martin,
I think that
roommates is necessarily a conflict. of
Okay,
interest.
so we
No,
wouldn't be
I mean,
stuck
I
with
think he will
somebody
do
else.
a substantive job and not be,
Okay.
persuaded by the fact that I've known him since college.
So we wouldn't be stuck with someone we haven't even heard of or know. Okay.
I don't think so, right? Is that what you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, good. The next question is, knowing that Green Lake did adopt what they had and then went back, what I'm worried about with an appeal is, you made a great point. Like if somebody doesn't like what my director says, but it's right, if they come to me and appeal that idea, I still have to back it. If we're going, instead of appealing with no new information, we really don't have any new information. Can we instead do what Green Lake did, adopt as is, and go back with a specific new ask based on motorboats with more information? Because what worries me is the response actually from the lieutenant, that although he says, I've never seen it done, it's because he starts by saying, the appeals process is not used often. Very few, and it's almost like warning you, very few local governments have not been supportive of our recommendations. So it's kind of leading you down that path of, this is where he says it though. Many times governments requesting something are not specific enough in their request. So I'm worried about, instead of wasting an appeal, should we just accept this and then get better information, get more info, and go with a brand new no motorboat request?
Yeah, I mean,
To
that's,
get that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the answer is yes, you can, and in fact, I believe that
He does recommend it.
he said that's the recommended approach, because perhaps by enacting the ordinance, letting a year go by, you may get the additional information you need to
Gives us
support,
time to get more data, more
to support the no
proof.
motivated, right.
Because it was really scary. You're right. Like everybody was in unison. We all clearly wanted it. What was really strange is they said they don't care about these
The
these
environment.
things. They don't care about the environment. Don't talk to us about the
aesthetics,
animals. Don't talk about
the
aesthetics.
pollution.
So everything important about the lake, don't talk about.
Safety, except for safety.
Just safety. So will it give us a chance, knowing it's aesthetics, knowing it is safety of animals, and they said blatantly we don't care. Can it give us time to find safety issues related to motorboats to go back again with a no motorboat request?
Well,
Yeah, my thought
Like
is
Green Lake, and we could talk to West Bloomfield.
thought as far as strategy goes, I mean, that it probably is I think it's a stronger case to make if we refile in a year from now with new data from what the lake's experienced, versus appealing directly now with the the information we have, which is, we can't point to any instances of conflicts or safety, because there haven't been any, because people have followed,
Because people
the
have been
ordinance.
following the no boat motorboat that they thought was in place.
Yeah, so that's one of those judgment calls. I mean, what the board wants to do, whether to, go to the mat on this issue right now. We could adopt and sort of go to the mat on the issue as best we can to get the no internal combustion engine part, or adopt, and because I could support, I suppose, either one of these, or adopt and document for a supplemental case brought in 1 or 2 years from now.
And would we even have to wait that long? Let's say that, because one of the fears is the Upper Long Lake group.
Absolutely.
So if the ones up there with the motorboats aren't typically coming on here, even if they have the auxiliary electrical so they can come on these, if they start coming on and causing problems and causing safety, it will give us data. Do we have to wait a full year?
No.
Or if we have data by June,
The statute.
can we rush
We could do it
forward?
right away.
Yeah, you could do it, if something happened, you could do it in 3 months.
Okay.
And certainly
coming up
too, I
on
would
voting
want to
season.
divide.
It's going to start quickly, so do we have to
Voting
wait?
season is here, so,
Yeah.
it's pretty, on a day like today, boy,
Right, we could divide them up too. I mean, the lakes that speak most loudly about the no motorboat rule, and I think for very good reason, are Lower Long Lake and Forest Lake. Both those lakes have access to Upper Long Lake,
Right.
where it's an all sports lake.
Right.
Those boats already will have access to come down here, and that will be a problem. I got to say also, that they will only be here at a slow no wake speed, and many already do come through because they have an internal combustion engine on their boat and a little electric motor. That is something that they currently do now. But those two lakes in particular, I think would be a stronger appeal today, right now, followed by Gilbert Lake, which is another lake that's in Wing Lake, which are two lakes that are large enough that someone might want to have a motorboat. Whereas Orange Lake or Wabeek Lake, they're small. This is really not as serious of a concern And if we distinguish between the different lakes and made a case on appeal in that way, it might strengthen our appeal.
Right, because then
You
you're
know.
not coming back saying, we disagree with everything, here's
Right.
10 again. If we pick the ones that are most likely, not we, if the people who say we want to appeal to, if it is all of those, but the others go, it seems like they would
And
say, okay,
that's-
they thought this through. Let's
Mhm.
just
That was a big part of my public comment to them, and they made us do it for every one of the lakes, but it doesn't, the DNR has this just really broad-based one-size-fits-all policy, and the lakes by acreage have huge differences.
Depth, acreage, and
Yeah.
all sorts of.
Oh, and just the sheer acreage alone, you know, makes a huge difference on what you can and can't do safely. And so I think that's a great idea to maybe, you know, instead of saying all of them, pick and choose the ones that
have the
that we
most
need.
danger of something happening.
Right.
Or at least the ones that have spoken up, because like you said, some were.
Even though we did do each one separately to
Chalmers,
them, and they could have come back and said, on these lakes, we're gonna go with, you know, the no wake policy, and on these other lakes, we will also say no motorboats, you know, because you can't even put a motorboat on some of these lakes, they're so small, but there's a few that you can.
Anything else? Michael, Chris?
I'm ready to make a motion. I would like to make a motion that we adopt it as written and that we get the data that makes sense on a lake-by-lake basis to make appeal based on what the residents want on those lakes.
So appeal, not new, not start over new with. No, start over.
Start over new, excuse me, which is what I believe Clerk, Martin.
Yeah, I'm torn. I mean,
switching it to new.
you know, I'm torn between appealing on a selective basis, adopting all and appealing a few on a selected lakes versus waiting and filing a request later. I just don't know yet. But
Well,
the
can you
motion is
adopt-
just about, you know, sort of the direction we want to go. Because
'cause
once we get to
and we have that more information.
implementation, we've got to.
Well, we are on a 60-day deadline to appeal.
Right, so could you go to the
have
next
make
slide,
a
Sean?
decision.
But I wouldn't want to make the appeal in the next 60, I don't know if we'd have enough data in the next 60 days to be able to
We won't.
make a logical and
We won't.
data-driven appeal unless we have significant events. And those would still only be maybe one or two, which would not show necessarily a pattern of abuse within the new ordinance.
But it goes from
Right, we
0 to
won't.
1 or 2. We could show that there's, like you talk about those trending lines. If you had no problem since 1970s, you make a rule change and all of a sudden we have a couple. Those outliers do matter.
But that would be bringing, that would.
That would be new.
Really
That's
would be an
not
appeal. That's new, right.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
that's the
I-
distinction you need to make.
That's why I'm asking the distinction of, do you
And
mean
Do I need to
appeal
give you
or
the distinction in the motion, or can I just say
Well,
that
we're,
allow
at
us?
this point, we're discussing it and trying to figure out what to do. To move adoption of the ordinance, we have to do an introduction meeting. There's a process that's involved in that. So at our next meeting, if the sense of the board is let's adopt these ordinances, then we'd bring it back at the next meeting as an introduction of an ordinance amendment. Then we have to publish a notice of that, and then we have to have a subsequent meeting. So 60 days is a tight timeline, in fact, but we have 2 more meetings where we can get this done after this one and do the required notices, and the deadline is May 27th, which, summer boating season's already upon us. But yeah, so what I'm looking for is some direction from the board as to kind of which way we want to go, and the next meeting we'll bring back the motions and the introduction of the ordinance, but.
Then I would suggest a new one. So I would like to adopt, and if on a case-by-case basis, based on the information we have, that each lake, based on the feedback we're getting, needs to have a new appeal or a whole new appeal done,
Whole new
we will do that.
application.
New- yes.
Application.
A whole new application, we'll do that that time.
I'll support that.
Support that. He's supported by Treasurer Shostak. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, no,
All opposed?
I have to vote now on that?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you feel
I'm
that
gonna
you
vote
could
no
get
at this
data?
point on that, but,
Do you feel you could get that, just to open the discussion? You feel you
no,
would
there's
have
not
the
any more,
data for
there's not
appeal?
any new data to bring up, but there's just the possibility of making the appeal and making the case. I mean, we could lose that. But, if we adopt all of them and appeal a couple of select lakes and make our best case, one, I don't think the chance that the director will say, I totally disagree and there's no basis at all and we lose what we have. I don't think that's gonna happen. I can't deny that isn't a risk, Dirk, and, I just don't know which way to go on it yet myself. I mean, it's the appeal for those, it's a really strongly held feeling with folks on those particular lakes about the no motorboats.
That's why I still want to do what Green Lake did and redo the
Yeah.
whole thing.
But we'll go.
Aren't you going to want to adopt them in any event?
Yes.
Because by
I want
saying
to
no,
adopt-
you're not adopting.
Adopt.
Okay.
I want to adopt all of them and then maybe appeal a couple of them. But I would definitely support the idea that we come back with a proposed ordinances to adopt what's been presented and consider whether or not we want to appeal or not at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think we definitely should
Well,
adopt them all.
So that would be a friendly amendment.
Vote on, so that was, do you want to amend yours as with that or just go as is?
Sure. All it does is provide the board options, right? So I would like to adopt based on we can make a chance to,
So we'll make a motion to come back to the next meeting with proposed ordinances to adopt the local water control as presented by the DNR and consider whether to appeal or to reapply.
And you'll know exactly which lakes by then that you're going to propose to appeal for and what you would propose would be different.
Yeah, I'll have some additional thoughts. We'll have additional feedback from people who live on the lakes.
Okay.
I'll have some additional thoughts as far as strategy goes.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
motion
Thank you,
by Trustee
Chris.
Kalinsky, do you still support?
I support that.
Support still by Treasurer Shostak, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That does pass.
Thanks, you
All right.
guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The flexibility.
Yeah. So next we have consider approval of a drug and alcohol policy for Bloomfield Township Senior Services Department as required by Suburban Authority for Regional Transportation Smart. We have Director Christine Tvaroha.
Yes, thank you very much. So SMART is just coming to us with what I would call a housekeeping type of action. The township, of course, has a drug and alcohol policy as part of our contracts and part of the handbook, but they really wanted it to be formulated to match the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, so that's what we've done. Dirk has certainly gone over it, Danny has gone over it. We're just asking tonight that, I hope that you've had a chance to look at it and adopt it for us. It only applies to our department.
And it's regarding their requirement.
It is purely to meet their contractual requirement that we have with them.
Anybody have any questions? No? Look for a motion?
Make a motion that we adopt the policy.
Support.
Motion by Trustee Murray, support by Trustee Kalinsky. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Should have had you first.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
We might have been more feisty then, though.
Yeah, she's tired. Next, speaking of feisty, here comes Chief John Leroy with our consider approval of Oakway Aid Association and Mutual Aid Box Alarm System Munis.
Yes, it's another quick one, hopefully. This is not so much an approval. Recently, the MDHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, required that all ALS transporting agencies have to have an updated and reviewed mutual aid agreement. So the Oakway Chiefs decided to bring it back to all the boards. This is the exact same mutual aid agreement, MABUS agreement, that was approved in 2019 with only one change. Is since then we've added an Independence Township as a member to make us 11 full-time fire departments. And Dirk reviewed the document and saw no issues with it, and just to allow us to review it officially and have the supervisor sign it for the next 5 years.
Anybody have any questions?
Make a motion.
For motion? Motion
Support.
by Trustee Burnett, support by Trustee Murray, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes.
Thanks,
We
John.
should have you at the end all the time, John. And here comes Corey. Consider award of the 2024 Jam.
Can you beat that time? That was under 30 seconds. So
Let's try.
The shot clock is going. The shot clock is
I
on.
am going to try.
Clock is on.
Okay, so consider award of the
All right.
2024 Jamron Sully Safety Path Americans Disability Act ADA Ramp Improvement Contract with Director Corey Elmas. I have to legally read those.
Yes, yes, sorry. Let's interrupt.
No, there's two.
Nope, that's the next one.
he's hazing you, Adam. I noticed he put you last of his
Yep.
three.
There it is. All right, perfect. Okay, thank you, board. The annual safety path, Jan Rosselli Safety Path program consists of the new safety path construction, the safety path maintenance, cleaning, clearing, and vegetation by DPW, safety path repair program, retaining wall repair program, and the ADA compliance and repair program. This year, 59 locations throughout the township along Inkster, Franklin, Walnut Lake Road, Horton, Lone Pine, Squirrel, Adams, Westview, and Franklin were identified. Removal and installation of approximately 13,000 square feet of 4-inch and 6-inch thick concrete, safety path and ADA ramps, landings, curb, diamond grinding, miscellaneous restoration, other items were included in this construction. Here's just a map of the intersections, locations for the ADA improvements throughout the township. Here's an example of a non-compliant ADA sidewalk. You can see there's no truncated dome. The curb is out of compliance in this location here. Similarly, no truncated dome there. There's no curb there. And same with these two locations here. They do have the curb, but the curb is non-compliance. It's hard to see, but in the gutter pan of the curb, that has to be flat across that to allow for ADA access. So, a total of 5 bids were received on March 26. Luigi Ferdinandi and Sons Cement from Roseville, Michigan, was the low bid amount at $360,572.33. References were provided, or references provided positive results from our consultants who's worked with Luigi Ferdinandi and Son, and we've checked also with other municipalities where they've worked with positive results as well. With that, staff is making the following recommendation. As it was included in your packet, I don't know that I need to read this, but the one item that I want to just point out here is that we've made kind of a minor adjustment with the exceedance amount of the contract. Up to 10% ESD can make those approvals. Anything above 10%, but less than 15%, would go to the township supervisor for her approval. Above 15%, we would come back to the board.
Anybody have any questions for Corey?
That was pretty fast.
That's why we're gonna always have Corey at the end.
I'd like to make a motion.
This is always happening going forward.
Make a motion to adopt it as written.
Support.
Motion by trustee Kalinsky, support by trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passes.
All right.
All right. Next, we also have Corey up there to consider the award of the tree grant contracts.
Okay, so this has been a challenge for the department for a few years. In 2021, the township was granted a tree grant to plant trees within right-of-ways throughout the township. Township obviously doesn't have park areas, so our right-of-ways were limited to where we can plant trees. But going back, I think, to 2021, staff has identified several areas, and I've got locations through here. So we were awarded the grant. The U.S. Forest Service reducing runoff in the Rouge River AOC grant, the Alliance of Rouge Communities grant. The challenge was getting the contractors to do the work. We went out to bid in 22 and again in 23 with 0 bidders. Okay, so we finally went out again. We tried again, made it one last effort, and this year, and we had 6 bidders. So kudos to Alex Kozlowski, our new, oh God, what is this title? It's late. Project coordinator, thank you. Struggled the other night with Mark too, I'm sorry. So anyways, we've got 80 trees identified for placement and they're planting in the township. Maple Road, Cranbrook Road, Wellington Avenue, Telegraph Road medians, Woodward Avenue medians. And you see we've got them listed here in those specific locations. The yellow triangle there, we even call out the tree, I think there, it's hard to see there, but in the lower left. The list on the right, you can see, hard to read on this presentation, but a wide variety of trees. Again, these species were selected in 2020 or 2021 when the program was implemented. So, and the locations haven't changed either since then. So, just again, we tried to get the number of contractors to even bid on this work, and I think with 6 bidders, I think we did okay on this round. I'd like to point out the 3 Ohio Buckeyes that are going on the Telegraph median there.
So we did ask Charles to stop putting Buckeyes into this, so that did not get passed on apparently to Alex.
It did not.
No more Buckeyes?
Well, the Buckeye tree, just for general knowledge, is a broadleaf tree with a coarse bark and
represents a horrible color.
Yeah, and
coarse bark.
yeah, and they don't really thrive well in Michigan in the fall. So,
so maybe not the best tree.
Tell
right?
Alex, please consider something else.
Yeah, no. So with that, you know, we're happy to move forward. We did do a reference check on the contractor. So ESD's recommending that the contract of the U.S. Forest Service reducing runoff in the Rouge River AOC be awarded to Greg Davis Landscape Services in the amount of $30,750, which is well below our budgeted amount. Township will be reimbursed $7,500 from the ARC, Alliance ARC, there it is. $40,000 is budgeted for the tree planting fiscal year 2025.
Have any questions? If not, I look for a motion.
I have one quick question. So any of the areas where we're planting trees are not in the area where we're planning on putting a safety path in the near future, is that correct?
Correct.
Perfect.
And some just recently got them. That's why they're, like, the Maple area is an area where there was
Maple
new
Road
road
just got work done.
construction. They ripped them out for the safety path.
So I want to make sure that we're not going to plant trees and make an investment in which we're going to cut down immediately. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
So.
yep, great point.
Any other questions?
I do. Is there a guarantee in some way the tree survives?
Yeah,
Or what
there's
is
a
the
warranty on the tree. The contractor is responsible. I don't want to misquote it. I believe it's a 2-year.
I heard something over here.
We think it's 2 years.
2 years? 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 2-year.
It's been a few years since we signed those contracts, but I remember.
Yeah, I read the contract today. The contractor is responsible for watering and maintenance and mulching, but DPW is responsible for like replacement mulch after the year. Their contractor's not responsible to come back out and remulch it the following year, but watering is part of it. It's included in the contract.
Great. One related question too is some of the weather events recently have wreaked havoc on existing trees. Has that been a point of conversation or, about anything to do with those?
Yeah, that's a good one. Other than
or what? Yeah, or severely damaged trees. Some of them like lost half the tree.
Yeah, I think specifically on Telegraph Road, we had some damage down there. I don't know. I haven't had those conversations with DPW yet, so
great.
But something that can be had.
Can you start this conversation?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So do we have any more questions? If not, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Barnett.
Support.
Support by trustee Kalinsky. All in favor?
Aye.
Have the
Opposed?
trees.
And
We got
now
My
we
favorite
have
topic.
6 of them.
6 letters,
Adam.
yeah.
He not only saved you for last, but for the biggest discussion. So we have the stormwater drainage public education. Adam Voelker.
Oh, thank you.
Can we turn the air off?
Yeah, it's freezing.
Is it freezing?
It's been
Okay, yeah.
cold in
Gotta
here all
stay away.
night, has it? I had really
fine
cold
with me.
water over my hands because it was so.
Sorry.
So we have this new thermostat, as you know, so we're at the best spot.
Thank you.
It's perfect.
I liked cold. I was
So do
enjoying it.
It was great.
It's freezing. I have my hands that are a couple more water.
Did you? Yeah. See, there you go. It worked.
So good evening. I'm Adam. I'm part of the Engineering and Environmental Services Department here in the township. I'm here to discuss the public education for stormwater drainage within the township that our department will be prepared to roll out within the next few weeks here. So a little bit of background on the project. Back in 2021, during a time of frequent and intense storm events, many calls came into the township from concerned homeowners or residents regarding flooding on their property or within their homes. So in response, the board tasked our department with investigating these situations, informing residents on jurisdictional ownership, and looking into ways to help mitigate those in future situations. And of course, the first step of that is informing the public. Some general concepts I would like to go over before we continue is what is considered a flood. And per the National Flood Insurance Program, a flood is defined as follows: a general or temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of normally dry land areas from overflow or inland or tidal water, or from complete inundation of normally dry land areas from overflow or inland or tidal water from the unusual and rapid accumulation or runoff of surface water from any source. And of course, the way that we mitigate floodwaters is through the use of storm sewer, which includes pipes, manholes, and catch basins, which can be found in parking lots and roads. In addition to that, there are ditches and swales within the road right-of-ways. And the last and most recent addition to that list is green infrastructure, such as rain gardens and bioswales. Back in 2016, the board voted to adopt the Oakland County's standard for stormwater facilities, which were most recently updated in 2021. And I just wanted to briefly go over those older design standards compared to what they are today. In that old design, storm sewer was designed to quickly and efficiently move stormwater off-site and downstream by means of pipes and culverts. And those systems were typically designed to be able to deal with what we call a 10-year storm, which is a storm whose intensity is likely to occur once every 10 years. But as weather changes and new design standards come out, our technologies have to change along with that. So on today's standards, we have moved more towards a design to contain that stormwater on site and allow for natural infiltration through the use of rain gardens and bioswales. And the capacity of those systems has increased from a 10-year storm event to a 100-year storm event. Another very important topic is who owns the storm sewer, majority of which is owned and operated by the Road Commission for Oakland County, the Michigan Department of Transportation, and the Water Resources Commissioner. Additionally, privately owned by homeowners associations, condos associations, and privately owned by homeowners. The township itself owns a very small percentage of storm sewer within the township, which is mainly composed of the township campus and off-site fire stations. Another very important topic to discuss whenever discussing stormwater is floodways and floodplains, which are areas adjacent to known bodies of water which have known flooding issues when these high-intensity storms hit. And if you live near or within some of these areas, you do have to have flood insurance. Just to briefly go over, the red is the floodway, which is reserved to carry flood flows during these intense storm events. The 100-year floodplain is the level of elevation that the waters are expected to rise during those 100-year storm events, and the 300-year floodplain is the same for a 300-year storm event. So if I'm a property owner on the township and I have identified an area on my property that oftentimes has flooding water or standing water, these are a few options that you can look to. As I discussed previously, a rain garden and French drain are two very great options. A rain garden being establishing deep-rooted native plants in these low spots that collect water to help absorb and infiltrate that water. French drains intercept and collect the storm water to allow for natural infiltration over time in a controlled manner. Regrading and bioswales are also great options. You're regrading your property or reestablishing what was there initially when you first developed the land. It just intercepts water, keeps it away from personal property, and directs it into our management systems. Bioswales are slightly different from ditches and swales because they integrate natural vegetation to help decontaminate the water before it infiltrates. And one caveat to this is that it's very important when you do employ these methods to make sure you have the proper permitting through the township, because you cannot create or exacerbate an existing flooding condition on your neighbor's property by doing this work. but the most important way to mitigate floodwater on your property is to ensure that your existing systems are being properly maintained. A catch basin full of leaves and a culvert full of sand and dirt is not helping anybody, and it's not being used the way it was intended. So it's very important to identify who owns these storm sewer systems and implement the correct stormwater operation and maintenance procedures. However, there's one caveat to that, and that is that weather is changing. This information was taken from the Engineer's Guidance to Changing Rainfall, published by SEMCOG. That's a bunch of words up there, but it can be summarized to this, that between the years of 1958 and 2016, the amount of rainfall happening in the top 1% of storms has increased by 42%, and that number isn't expected to increase by another 40% by late century. In addition to that, the number of intense storm events in the Midwest region is expected to rise by 2.4 days per season by the end of late century as well. What all that means is that storm sewer systems that were installed 20, 30, or 40 years ago are more than likely outdated. And EESD recommends that if you are a private homeowner or private owner of these systems, that you discuss or look into discussing potential future remedies with a engineering firm or landscape contractor. So all this information that was presented tonight, in addition to more information that we collected throughout our research, was compiled into a formal report, which will be made available on the township website. And in an effort to make all this information more digestible to the homeowner, we created this wonderful pamphlet that you have before you now. And we have to give full kudos to Amy from the Community Cable Department, who helped us create that pamphlet, help us roll it out.
Yay, Amy.
She's doing great. Well, thank you to you guys, because you make this sound so quick and easy, but you spent months working on figuring all of this out and how is the best way and all the resources you've reached into. So we appreciate that this is the first step needed to educate people.
Absolutely. I'm just going to briefly go over what's on the pamphlet. As you can see, a lot of information that was covered tonight is included, such as what is a flood, understanding floodplains, and it also includes contact information to be able to contact those responsible parties once they've been identified. And Amy came up with the wonderful idea to include that QR code, which directs you to a web page on the township's website with the full report, additional resources for the curious homeowner. And then this just goes into more facts to consider and more areas of responsibility. So in conclusion, EESD has jump-started our initiative to educate the public on storm sewer standards, who owns and maintains the storm sewer, and means to mitigate flooding on personal property. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
When are you going to be sending these out to all the HOAs?
So pending no revisions requested by the board tonight, Amy is currently working with her suppliers to get stuff printed on formal paper and not on printer paper, and she expects to have a quote ready with.
That's pretty good, right?
Okay, well, now that I know that, I will give my suggestion that I thought we had printed these and they were ready to go. Where we have these, WRC, RCOC, we all know what those stand for, but sometimes residents don't. So if she could find the space somewhere, we have the contact on the back which may be fine, you can use the acronym, but where we're laying out areas of responsibility, I think it should be spelled out what WRC is, what RCOC, and maybe even MDOT. I mean, I don't want to take for granted that residents know what those agencies are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree, that's a really good idea. Because we get used to using them, but.
Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I just want to say thank you. Great work, you guys. We had a major rain event here a few years ago, and they happen every once in a while, but they're happening more and more, which is exactly what climate change is predicted, that we would see more serious rain events here in Michigan than we used to. So it's impacting all of us and all the residents here, and folks need to know this stuff sooner than later, especially the part that almost all of the stormwater systems are privately owned or owned by county or state entities. So this is a great, great work. Thank you very much for doing it.
Yeah, great job. It's very helpful, and the residents definitely will appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next we have approved the payroll and vouchers for April 8th. Unless there's any questions, I'd look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by
Support.
trustee Murray, support by trustee Kalinsky. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. And next our last motion.
I move we adjourn.
Motion by clerk
Support.
Brook, support by trustee Barnett. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?